Chapter 583. Without the obstruction of corpse energy, Taoist Tiger's body could recover in a short period of time even if it was severely injured. It was clearly written in the Tao Monarch's heavenly book that Taoist Tiger's body was the strongest among the 6 beasts. If even the Tao Monarch said so, then it must be true. Moreover, Taoist Tiger could withstand the terrifying corpse energy for hundreds of years. Taoist Tiger could really be called the strongest body. Ignoring Taoist who for now, Lin Jin focused all his attention on the headless zombie. The forced immortal erosion refining energy naturally flowed into the headless zombie's arm. The 2 different types of corpse energy were currently engaged in a frenzy, devouring each other. However, no matter which side it was, they were not weak. Therefore, this battle had clearly fallen into some kind of fierce battle, and no one could do anything to the other. Lin Jin watched anxiously from the side. He had to ensure that everything was going according to his plan and that nothing else could go wrong. Otherwise, if things went out of control, Xu Xiaolu would be the first to suffer. At that moment, the corpse energy on the headless zombie's body surged. It seemed to have been stimulated by the immortal eroding and refining corpse energy. Hence, the power that was originally suppressed loosened a little and began to move violently. The headless zombie was even struggling, trying to break free from the demon sealing sword suppression. This wasn't good. Lin Jin could tell that the headless zombie had the upper hand. This wasn't a situation Lin Jin wanted to see happen. If the immortal devouring energy couldn't suppress the headless zombie, or if the zombie could even resist the demon sealing sword suppression, things would get troublesome from here on out. Fortunately, Lin Jin was prepared. With a flick of his finger, Lin Jin pierced the headless zombie's acupoints, using the spirit forging needle to suppress the creature. At the same time, Lin Jin waited for an opportunity to pounce over and toss a monster sealing pill into the headless zombie's abdomen mouth. Regardless of whether it worked or not, there was no harm in trying. What Lin Jin needed now was absolute certainty. He even had a plan to use this opportunity to suppress the headless zombie completely, or even control it. With that, Xu Xiaolu's painting realm wouldn't be eroded anymore. Now that the headless zombie had been attacked from all sides, the rampaging zombie energy gradually weakened. Just as Lin Jin predicted, a balance was formed between the zombies. The immortal devouring and refining energy was probably trying to take over the headless zombie's body. However, the needles Lin Jin had left in the zombie's body began to move, releasing the zombie's corpse energy. The immortal devouring and refining energy couldn't do anything about it now. An equilibrium was formed. This was a bit like stacking blocks to build a tower. You had to stack them up one by one to ensure balance and stability. When the last block was placed up, the tower would be maintained. That was all. What Lin Jin was doing now was exactly the same. It might seem simple, but in fact, it required powerful supernatural powers and time. By the time the headless zombie fell into a deep slumber and the aura stopped spreading, Lin Jin realized that several hours had passed. He was drenched in sweat. Manipulating the silver needles was also very taxing on one's mind. Fortunately, the matter was temporarily suppressed. This result was pretty good. He had solved the problem of the immortal devouring refined corpse chi. He had also used the immortal devouring refined corpse chi to further suppress the headless zombie. The corpse chi that had been spreading slowly before was now under control. However, Lin Jin was still a little dissatisfied, because he realized that the monster sealing pill he stuffed into the headless zombie's stomach didn't seem to be of any use. It could only be said that the headless zombie was different from regular monsters. The surrounding aura that resembled black lava had calmed down. However, it had spread for more than 10,000 feet. These things were difficult to get rid of and would always be a huge threat. However, Lin Jin didn't have any better ideas, so he could only leave it be for now until he found a way to deal with it. Now that the problem was solved, Taoist who was the most excited. After all, the corpse aura that had tormented him for hundreds of years was gone. His entire body felt much more relaxed, and the pain that had been tormenting him at all times also disappeared without a trace. Clearly, this was the first time in hundreds of years that Taoist who felt refreshed. "Brother Lin." Taoist who went up and bowed. Lin Jin quickly helped Taoist who up and comforted him. This made the straightforward Taoist who admire Lin Jin even more, and their friendship deepened. Lin Jin quickly helped Taoist who up and consoled him. Taoist who was even more impressed by Lin Jin, and their friendship deepened. Lin Jin looked up at Xu Xiaolu, and the latter understood his intention. With a wave of his hand, the painting world was sealed off completely. In the blink of an eye, the three of them were inside Peach Blossom residence. Lin Jin naturally thanked Xu Xiaolu along with Taoist who, and the latter accepted it calmly. She had contributed the most to this project. After all, a creature as ferocious as the headless zombie was sealed inside her painting world. Needless to say, it had a huge impact on her painting world. However, Xu Xiaolu had never mentioned it. Lin Jin knew her personality. If it was something insignificant, she might announce it to the world, and come here to claim credit. She might even throw a tantrum and complain. But if it was something serious, she wouldn't say a word. She would bear it silently. Lin Jin understood Xu Xiaolu. Just like how Xu Xiaolu understood him. 1 second ago, Xu Xiaolu seemed to be angry about something. But in the next, she seemed to have made a new discovery, and her previous anger was instantly forgotten. "Lin Jin, what's that sword hanging on your waist?" Xu Xiaolu stared at the breezy monster sword hanging on Lin Jin's waist, her eyes filled with excitement as if she had discovered something valuable. Lin Jin quickly took off the breezy monster sword. He had planned to ask Xu Xiaolu about it when he had the time. After all, this painting spirit of Xu Xiaolu's must know more about monsters than he did. "This is a sword spirit. Take a look, Xu Xiaolu." Lin Jin handed it over. The latter took it without the slightest hint of embarrassment. "It really is a sword spirit. How rare, how rare." Xu Xiaolu was beaming. At this moment, it was as if they had returned to the Academy's Peach Blossom residence. Taoist Tiger wanted to interject several times, but he held back in the end. The more he looked at the sword, the more familiar it seemed. In the end, realization dawned on him as he mused. Isn't this the breezy flag master from Black Wind Cave? Who knew he had been subdued by Brother Lin? Taoist who was impressed by this. Even he couldn't do it if he were in Lin Jin's shoes. Xu Xiaolu looked left and right, trying to pull the sword out. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get the sword out of its scabbard. It was as if it was welded to the scabbard. "Forget it, this sword spirit has already recognized a master, so I won't be able to pull it out. However, this sword's origins are definitely not small. The sword spirit on it is pure and mellow. The spirit's age might be even greater than mine." Xiao Shulu said. Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat. If someone else had said this, Lin Jin wouldn't have taken it seriously. But since it came from Xu Xiaolu, he had to take it seriously. Chapter 584. Art spirits and sword spirits were essentially the same, so Lin Jin immediately took Xu Xiaolu's words seriously. If this breezy sword's sword spirit had existed longer than Xu Xiaolu, then this thing might be a relic left behind from the immortal era. Xu Xiaolu couldn't pull out the sword, so she asked Lin Jin to give it a try. Lin Jin managed to pull it out easily. However, Lin Jin hadn't noticed the sword spirit acknowledging him as its master. Could it be something that happened when he subdued this breezy sword? That was possible. Back then, Lin Jin used Sky Scorching Palm to unleash powerful flames. Since the ancient times, metal and iron were afraid of fire. Perhaps it was because he subdued the monster sword and forced it to acknowledge him as its master. Interestingly, Lin Jin didn't know about this himself. Xu Xiaolu clearly enjoyed researching new and interesting things like this. She was definitely well-read, and had a deep understanding of the evolution of the current monsters. A sword spirit that recognizes its master is considered a powerful defensive measure. However, this sword of yours seems to be lacking something else. If it were, its strength would increase by more than 10 times. Lin Jin couldn't tell if Xu Xiaolu was being serious or just trying to fool Lin Jin. Either way, Lin Jin was filled with anticipation. What is it missing? Lin Jin asked. Swordsmanship. Xu Xiaolu thought about it, then said, This sword is extremely sharp, there is no doubt about it, but this sword spirit's realm is clearly not high, even it itself could not unleash the sword's full power. Logically speaking, there should be some corresponding sword techniques that can control the sword spirit and unleash the sword's sharpness. Lin Jin nodded after some thought. Xu Xiaolu's words made sense. Lin Jin had met this breezy flag spirit before. She wasn't weak, but she was facing Lin Jin. Had it been anyone else, they might not even be a match for her. More importantly, this breezy flag spirit didn't have a barbaric personality. Instead, she had the elegance of a scholar. What did this mean? It meant that when this sword spirit was born, she was taught by a human. Otherwise, she wouldn't be like this. Lin Jin explained this to Xu Xiaolu. The latter tilted her head in thought before slapping her thigh. I see. From the looks of it, she seemed to know something. Lin Jin quickly inquired. Xu Xiaolu laughed. It's just like a ferocious tiger being sent to a vegetarian temple, where it has to eat vegetarian food and chant Buddhist prayers all day long, suppressing its natural instincts. At the very least, it can't bring out its strength. What are the strengths of a ferocious tiger? Of course, they have sharp claws and fangs. Even carnivores. Lin Jin immediately felt as if he had seen the sun after the clouds had been dispelled. Xu Xiaolu, are you saying that the clear wind bewitching sword is the same? Lin Jin asked. Xu Xiaolu nodded. Is there a need to ask? To put it bluntly, this blade spirit doesn't know how to use his strengths and talents at all. It's just like how a ferocious tiger eats vegetarian food and prays to Buddha. It must have listened to some useless scholar's lectures before gaining sentience. However, it neglected the nature of the weapon. With this explanation, Lin Jin finally understood. A tiger raised by lambs yearned to become a lamb. However, a ferocious tiger was a ferocious tiger after all. It only needed a little guidance for its nature to erupt. It was the same for the Qingfeng sword. Hence, the Qingfeng sword had to learn swordsmanship and undergo training. In all honesty, this can be considered your opportunity. This sword spirit is not to be underestimated. If he was extremely sharp right from the start, reaching the peak, then you wouldn't have a chance to subdue him at all. Xu Xiaolu said. This was good luck. Lin Jin didn't deny it. As the two of them chimed in and chatted away, Taoist who was confused. But he knew that the sword in Lin Jin's hand was his Black Wind Cave's second in command. He hadn't noticed it before, but now, Taoist who finally found an opportunity to interject. Flag Master Qingfeng does like to chew on words. Sometimes he would even come over to preach some great philosophy to me. Just listening to him gives me a headache. His personality really needs to be changed. Since he's a blade spirit, he should be able to destroy the world without competing with others. What future can he have if he only knows how to talk about philosophy? It was obvious that Taoist who didn't mind that Lin Jin had subdued Black Wind Cave's second in command. Lin Jin had saved his life, and they were now sworn brothers, so Taoist who wouldn't mind a trivial matter like this. If Lin Jin could teach Flag Master Qingfeng a good lesson, Taoist who would be more than happy to do so. After all, he had known Flag Master Qingfeng for hundreds of years. A sword was a sword, why pretend to be a scholar? With Little Book Tower's guidance and reminder, Lin Jin instantly felt enlightened and his mind cleared up. He wasn't particularly fond of studying swordsmanship and skills. But coincidentally, Lin Jin wasn't completely different. On the contrary, he had reached a height in the field of swordsmanship that ordinary people couldn't hope to achieve. Even the divine sword scroll he obtained by chance in the unending nature landscape allowed him to condense a sword intent with his psyche to kill without leaving a trace. However, Lin Jin stopped studying it. After all, he didn't have much talent when it came to swordsmanship. His sword intent was only so powerful because of the divine sword scroll. Lin Jin had at least this much self-awareness. However, the divine sword scroll was undeniably powerful. Hence, after listening to Xu Xiaolu's analysis, Lin Jin immediately thought of this. It would be a waste for such a powerful divine sword scroll to rot in his hands. He might as well pass it on to Qingfeng. Moreover, according to Xu Xiaolu, since the sword had acknowledged him as its master, it would never betray him again. Since that was the case, passing the divine sword scroll to Qingfeng seemed to be the most suitable choice. Lin Jin was also thinking of ways to improve his strength. The Qingfeng sword was decent at the moment, but it was still a distance away from becoming a top-tier combatant. Needless to say, it wouldn't be able to deal with an existence like Corpse Dao. If Lin Jin could use the divine sword scroll to raise the Qingfeng sword scroll's strength, that would be great. However, this matter wasn't urgent. Lin Jin instructed Xu Xiaolu to keep an eye on the headless zombie in the painting world. This thing couldn't be removed right now. Even though it was a terrifying ticking time bomb, it had to stay here. Hence, if anything out of the ordinary happened, they had to react immediately. Xu Xiaolu was even more concerned about this than Lin Jin was. After all, if something happened to the headless zombie, she would be the first one to suffer. Don't worry. Xu Xiaolu waved. Lin Jin still had a lot of things to do, so after chatting for a while longer, he got up to leave. Taoist Hu quickly said his goodbyes as well. This time, Taoist Hu didn't say much and just listened to Lin Jin and Xu Xiaolu. Go on, go on. Don't come to my painting world if there's nothing important. Nothing good ever comes out of your visit. Xu Xiaolu clearly didn't mean what she said. Despite what she said, she was actually thinking the exact opposite. Lin Jin knew that. Just as he was about to use Cosmos Ink, Lin Jin suddenly remembered something and said, Xu Xiaolu, with your beast appraising skills, you could have been promoted to a rank 6 beast appraiser long ago. Zhong Zifeng could have been a rank 5 beast appraiser too. The only reason he didn't is because he respects you and doesn't dare to surpass you in terms of beast appraiser rank. Even if it's for the sake of others, you should consider getting promoted. Chapter 585. Lin Jin had long wanted to say this to Xu Xiaolu but never had the chance. Now that he thought of it, he decided to. After all, Mr. Zhong was a decent person. Even if it was for his sake, Lin Jin felt that he should say this. It was also because no one else dared to say this to Xu Xiaolu except himself. Promotion to rank 6? Xu Xiaolu didn't seem to mind. What's the point of that? But since you're the one who suggested it, I'll consider it. What's there to consider? It's decided. Lin Jin could still make some decisions for Xu Xiaolu, even if he had to force her to do so. Alright, but I want curator to perform the ceremony for me. Xu Xiaolu began negotiating. Lin Jin was stunned. Then, he came to a realization. A ceremony wasn't a trivial matter, but it was necessary. In this day and age, the only person who could surpass Xu Xiaolu in beast appraising was curator. In this case, the only person who was qualified to give such a ceremony to the small book pavilion was the curator. This wasn't a big deal to Lin Jin. After all, he was the curator. Hence, he readily agreed. I can assure you of my master's condition now. Let's set a time and I'll call my master over. Lin Jin nodded. After Lin Jin said this, Xiao Lu no longer had any meaning to it, so the matter was settled. It would be set for 3 months from now. Having said that, Lin Jin activated Cosmos Ink and left the painting world with Taoist Hu. Back in Black Wind Cave, Taoist who had just gotten rid of his corpse energy, so he needed to recuperate in seclusion to recover the energy he had lost over the years. Lin Jin also had to teach Breezy Monster the divine sword. Lin Jin was looking forward to it. As for the Five Palms landscape cult, Lin Jin wasn't in a hurry. The Four Seas Freedom Gourd had been there for centuries, so a few more days wouldn't matter. Moreover, Lin Jin was now doubtful of Taoist, whose evaluation of Water God cult. Taoist who said that Water God cult was a motley crew, but was that really the case? To be able to operate in Liangzhou for centuries meant that they were capable. Even so, Lin Jin couldn't let his guard down. Taoist whose cave abode wasn't small, so Lin Jin took up an entire room. He removed Breezy Monster and placed it on the stone table before sitting down cross-legged to recite the divine sword step. After reciting it once, Lin Jin paused for a moment to observe the Breezy Monster sword. The sword that had been motionless at first began to tremble, as if it was reacting to extreme excitement. Lin Jin smiled. That was right. Even someone like him, who did not care much about the way of the sword, was immediately attracted by the contents of the Heavenly Tao Sword invitation when he first saw it. If he was already like this, then there was no need to mention a sword spirit. To use an analogy, it was like a tiger that had grown up in a temple and was eating meat for the first time. It of to be. Right now, the Clear Wind Demon Sword was like this. In fact, it was even more inferior. In the next instant, a silhouette emerged from the blade. It was the Flag Master from before. The Flag Master looked incredibly excited as he prostrated himself at the sight of Lin Jin. Seeing this, Lin Jin began to explain his understanding of the divine sword step. These were some of Lin Jin's personal knowledge. After all, he had cultivated and studied the steps himself, so he had more or less gained some insight. These insights would definitely help the Breezy Monster avoid detours. This time, Lin Jin explained in great detail. It took him several hours to explain his understanding and insight. The Breezy Monster listened attentively throughout the process. Then, the Breezy Monster's shadow bowed at Lin Jin before turning into a stream of light and returning to the sword. Then, a layer of light appeared on the monster's sword. It floated like a cloud, yet also resembled a colorful sunset. It was a mystical sight to behold. Lin Jin knew that the Breezy Sword was probably digesting the contents of the Divine Sword Scroll. Now that he thought about it, teaching the Breezy Sword the Divine Sword Scroll was a wise decision, and it would definitely be effective. But how effective was it, Lin Jin wasn't sure. Without disturbing the Breezy Monster from studying the Divine Sword steps, Lin Jin began to wander around Protector Who's cave. Noticing that Lin Jin had come out of seclusion, Protector Who came out as well. Ha ha ha, Brother Lin, it's all thanks to you this time. It's been centuries and this is the first time I've felt so relaxed. After a round of recovery, Protector Who was in high spirits as if he had been reborn. Being tormented by corpse energy for centuries wasn't a comfortable experience. Fortunately, Protector Who was strong enough to last this long. Had it been anyone else, they would have been turned into a zombie by now. Lin Jin went over to take a look at Protector Who. Not bad. Protector Who had fully recovered. There was no corpse energy left in his body, and the wound on his back had healed completely. Although it was no longer a big problem, Taoist Whose losses were still quite large. Over the past few hundred years, his cultivation had not progressed much. It was still the same as before. From what Lin Jin could tell, Protector Who was probably the weakest among the 6 beasts Lin Jin had ever met. He might even be weaker than the insect beast master Lin Jin met at the beginning. However, given Taoist Tiger's talent, his strength would rise in the future. There was no need for Lin Jin to tell Protector Who about this. Lin Jin suggested that they stay in Black Wind Cave and gather the monsters together. When Lin Jin and Protector Who appeared, the monsters in Black Wind Cave immediately bowed in unison. This included the monsters who had pledged allegiance to Lin Jin. Protector Who was a straightforward person. When Lin Jin said he wanted to gather the monsters and guide them onto the right path, Protector Hu took it seriously. Speaking of all these years, Taoist Hu didn't manage the demonic beasts in the cave, and he felt quite ashamed. At the same time, he knew that his personality was free and unrestrained, and he wasn't suited to rule the Black Wind Cave. All these years, he had been a hands-off shopkeeper. The matters of the cave were all handled by the Clear Wind Flag Master and the Fierce Wind Flag Master, his two right-hand men. This time, after recovering from his injuries, Taoist Hu planned to give up his position completely. After all, he still had a lot of things to do, one of which was to find Corpse Tao for revenge. This was the most important thing that Taoist Hu would do next. After summoning all the monsters, Protector Hu announced that he was giving up the position of Cave Master to Lin Jin. It was simple, straightforward, and it only took one sentence. "Greetings, new Cave Master." A monster with quick reflexes immediately went up to greet Lin Jin. With a monster taking the lead, the others followed suit, scrambling to be first. It was done. It was even easier than Lin Jin expected. This was all thanks to Protector Hu. According to Protector Hu, most of the monsters in Black Wind Cave had cultivated into monsters, so their loyalty wasn't a problem. However, just to be safe, Lin Jin chose a dozen or so flag beasts with the best qualifications and fed them the monster sealing pill before teaching them the orthodox beast energy formation. Chapter 586. Lin Jin already had the complete beast energy formation. Apart from that, he also had the demonic emperor technique. Just these alone were enough to raise the strength of Black Wind Cave's monsters to another level. However, Lin Jin didn't impart the technique to everyone. He first taught the beast energy formation to the 10 or so flag bearers he handpicked. Once they learned it, they would pass it on to the other monsters according to his rules. In addition, Taoist Hu's management of Black Wind Cave's monsters was extremely lax. There were no rules at all. Even if there were, they could be counted on one hand. This clearly wouldn't do. After a quick count, Black Wind Cave had close to 100 monsters that could transform. This so-called transformation included those that were half human and half beast. In fact, monsters that could truly master the art of transfiguration were few and far between. There were more that couldn't transform. Some had gained sentience, some were still wild, and some were still muddle-headed. There were about 200 to 300 of them. Black Wind Cave was quite a sight to behold. There was no lack of rare beasts among them. Even Lin Jin was seeing some for the first time. After all, Liangzhou and Zhongzhou were thousands of miles apart. Their different geographical features meant that the beasts they produced were different as well. Lin Jin obviously liked these. Next, he ordered for all monsters, including the wild beasts, to be checked one by one. He was using this opportunity to record them into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Some of them had hidden illnesses, so Lin Jin treated them casually. This way, he managed to earn quite a bit of loyalty. Also, Lin Jin knew that nothing could be accomplished without rules. Hence, the first thing he did was to decide on Black Wind Cave's future development path and set a series of rules. If a sect were to look at it, they would be able to tell that this was a series of rules. It was obvious that Lin Jin wanted to turn Black Wind Cave into a sect for monster cultivators. This had been his initial plan. To become a sect, they would need a grandmaster. This was easy to solve. Lin Jin decided on 2 grandmasters for Black Wind Cave. One of them was obviously a Taoist. This was easy to understand. As Taoist who was the cave master, there was nothing wrong with his master becoming the grandmaster. Moreover, in terms of strength and reputation, the Taoist's name was extremely well known. As for the second grandmaster, Lin Jin decided on him as curator. He had a plan for this. The Black Wind Tunnel was a powerful aid he had arranged for the curator. Under extreme circumstances, it could become an incomparably tyrannical combat force, and on normal days, it could also increase the curator's reputation. Think about it, if the Black Wind Cave, a demonic cultivation sect, were to rise to prominence and its name would resound throughout the world, then as the founder, the curator, his status would definitely rise as well. That kind of hidden deterrence was also a part of his strength. In the future, no matter where he went, just this name alone would be enough to make most of his enemies surrender without a fight. Although Lin Jin wasn't an expert in this field, he was well aware of the principles behind it. Furthermore, teaching these demonic beasts to walk the right path and do good deeds was also a merit. What came next was the rules Lin Jin had set up on behalf of the two patriarchs. There were 60 or 70 of them, and they were all about leading people to do good, to do proper things, and to be open and aboveboard. For this reason, Lin Jin had specially selected a dozen of the strongest cultivators to form an enforcement team to enforce the sect's rules. Anyone who disobeyed would be punished according to sect rules. At first, a few insolent fellows would definitely die. But as the saying went, kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Only by doing so could the other monsters understand the importance of obeying the sect's rules. Although there were a lot of things to do, Lin Jin handled them in an orderly manner. In just 2 days, he had sorted out Black Wind Tunnel's matters. Next up, he just had to follow the prescribed order. For the past 2 days, Lin Jin had been waiting for the breezy monster. Ever since he imparted the Divine Path Sword Scroll, the breezy monster had entered a mystical cultivation state. Just like a person in meditation, Lin Jin didn't disturb it, nor could he. He could only wait for the breezy monster to wake up on its own. However, 2 days had passed and the breezy monster still showed no signs of waking up. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin decided not to wait any longer. He had to go to Mount Five Palms to retrieve the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. Taoist who volunteered to go with him. Lin Jin didn't reject him. There was a possibility of conflict with Water God cult, so having one more expert meant a higher chance of success. Early in the morning, Lin Jin rode on a cloud and brought Taoist who with him to Mount Five Palms. In Liangzhou's territory, Mount Five Palms was a well-known place. Not only was it because of the unique scenery here where several mountain ranges were joined together, looking like a palm from afar. It was a spectacular sight, but it was also because Water God cult had risen to fame here in recent centuries. To Lin Jin, while Mount Five Palms was majestic, it was too desolate. However, the center of Mount Five Palms was covered in lush greenery. It was said to be Liangzhou's largest oasis. Looking at it from afar, one could clearly see the green basin in the yellow sand next to it. Lin Jin didn't go down immediately. He was here for the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. If Water God cult had nothing to do with the Four Seas Freedom Gourd, Lin Jin wouldn't bother provoking them. Standing on a cloud 1,000 feet above the ground, Lin Jin saluted Taoist who, "Brother Tiger, I'll be casting a spell to summon the Daelord's artifact later. Please guard me." Taoist who laughed heartily and nodded. "Don't worry, brother. With me around, no one will be able to disturb your spell casting." Lin Jin had no doubt about this. After recuperating for the past few days, Taoist who had fully recovered his strength. To Lin Jin, there were only a handful of experts in this world who could defeat Taoist who. Invoking a spell, Lin Jin began casting the artifact manipulation spell recorded in Taoist whose heavenly scroll. Return to the Four Seas, Heaven and Earth Water, artifact, return. Opening his palm, an invisible wave of mana rippled out. Come to think of it, Lin Jin wasn't sure if this spell would work, but since it was mentioned in Daelord's heavenly book that this spell would work within 100 miles of the artifact, allowing him to summon and leave at will, Lin Jin had to give it a try. After all, Taoist whose heavenly scroll only mentioned that the artifact was hidden in Liangzhou's Mount Five Palms. Looking around, Mount Five Palms was a huge place. If Lin Jin had to rely on manpower, who knew how long it would take? Hence, using a spell to summon the artifact was the most convenient method. The first time Lin Jin cast the spell, nothing happened after a series of ripples. Lin Jin knew that either the artifact wasn't here, or his mana was too low. Immediately, flames surged out of Lin Jin's body. This was the power of his first blood contract pet beast, the firewolf. Then, the flames turned blood-red. This was the power of his second blood contract pet beast, the ghost blood beast. Borrowing the power of 2 rank 5 pet beasts, Lin Jin cast the spell again. Rumble. There was a strange noise. Lin Jin could clearly sense that there was a response. No doubt it was the 4 Seas gourd. This discovery excited Lin Jin. It was good that the artifact was still here. Since it was responding, it meant that the mana was still there. As Lin Jin continued to cast his spell, Taoist who looked down at the commotion and was dumbfounded. Chapter 587. The 5 Palms Mountain below was the oasis where the Water God sect was located. At this moment there were bursts of roars, as if the sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. In fact, it was so. The headquarters of the Water God sect was built in this oasis. After hundreds of years of development, the power of the Water God sect was absolutely unparalleled in Liangzhou. The Water God sect was able to develop and dominate Liangzhou in hundreds of years because of its founder, Taoist Black Water. That was the first generation of the Water God sect. For hundreds of years, the Water God sect had been passed down for 3 generations. There were thousands of members, many of whom were masters. Most of them were fugitives and bandits who had nowhere else to go. They came to the Water God sect to seek shelter, and the Water God sect accepted them all. One could imagine that the cult was filled with murderous maniacs. What they did was definitely not a good deed. They would do anything to achieve their goals. It was all thanks to the Water God cult that the Liangzhou had been in chaos for 100 years. In Liangzhou, only the Water God sect bullied others. They had never been bullied by others. Today there was a sudden earth-shattering tremor, which directly stunned the people at the headquarters of the Water God sect. Soon, they knew that someone had come to their door to fight. How could this be? There are people in the sky. A sharp-eyed member of the sect pointed at 2 figures on a cloud above his head and shouted. Immediately, some masters who could fly in the sky displayed their skills and flew into the sky. Go and report to the leader. The other members who could not fly in the sky immediately took action. In fact, at this time, the 3rd leader of the Water God sect, Taoist Redwater, was already alarmed. Not only him, but the 2 former leaders who had been in seclusion were also alarmed. One was the 2nd leader, Taoist Blackwater, and the other was the founder of the Water God sect, Taoist Blackwater. These 2 had retired behind the scenes and had been in seclusion. What were they doing? They were studying a treasure. Taoist Blackwater had relied on this treasure to show his strength and establish the Water God sect. Today, as usual, the 2 former leaders were in seclusion in a very secret place in the headquarters. There was a gourd floating above a pool. This gourd looked as if it was carved out of crystal. It was sparkling and translucent, like a 10,000-year-old profound ice. The mouth of the gourd opened wide, and a steady stream of water flowed out. It was as if there were spiritual water dragons, and it entered the profound pool below. The opening of the pool didn't seem big, but it was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. It was connected to the underground undercurrents, and it was also the reason why this oasis could be so prosperous. One had to know that hundreds of years ago, the 5 Palms Mountain River was the same as the majority of the Liang province. It was barren and had no water source at all. With this gourd, water could be produced out of thin air. With this, the Water God sect could grow bigger and bigger. Apart from that, this gourd contained some kind of divine ability. Even if it just stayed by its side, it would be able to absorb an endless amount of water spiritual energy, and it could even extend one's lifespan. The 1st generation sect master, Taoist Blackwater, was already 531 years old. In terms of lifespan, he was already comparable to some of the ancient loose immortals. Unless he had some special secret arts, It was impossible for a human below the immortal realm to live for so long. However, Taoist Blackwater had only lived for so long, and the key was the gourd. Taoist Blackwater was also a genius of his generation. After 100 years, he had actually comprehended a method of absorbing spiritual energy from the temple, which could absorb water's spiritual energy and extend his lifespan. Even so, Taoist Blackwater was already extremely old. Perhaps after a few more years, even with this gourd, he wouldn't be able to survive. It was precisely because of this that Taoist Blackwater hadn't taken a single step out of the gourd in the last few tens of years, and he stayed by its side day and night precisely because he relied on the water spirit energy within the gourd to nourish his body. Once he left, then perhaps he would lose the nourishment of the water spirit energy within a few hours and become a dried corpse. The second-generation sect master, Taoist Blackwater, was a disciple that Taoist Blackwater had accepted 200 years ago. He looked very old now, and his cultivation was not bad, but it was not as good as Taoist Blackwater. He was also relying on the gourd to survive. Now, the affairs of the Water God sect had been handed over to Taoist Blackwater's disciple, Taoist Redwater, who had been accepted by Taoist Blackwater 80 years ago. The two of them were focused on seclusion to comprehend the path of longevity. Just now, the originally stable gourd suddenly glowed brightly and began to vibrate. Taoist Blackwater and Taoist Uwater were startled. They had been guarding this place for hundreds of years, and this was their first time encountering such a situation. Their eyes widened, unsure of what was happening. Taoist Uwater immediately waved his big sleeve, and a flying snake fish flew out from his sleeve. This was a strange beast with a water attribute that could survive in places without water. It could fly and was extremely ferocious. It liked to eat animals like tigers and leopards and was extremely rare. This beast was Taoist Uwater's pet beast. It had been with him for more than 200 years and its strength had reached rank 5. Calm down, Uwater. Taoist Blackwater was astute and steady. He got up, cast a spell, and strengthened the barrier. They had set up many formations here. Taoist Blackwater was confident that even if someone wanted to ambush them, they wouldn't be able to get in. As for why the gourd was acting strangely, they just had to wait and see. However, at this moment, a voice seemed to ring out. Return to the 4 seas, absorb the water of the universe, return to the treasure. It was Lin Jin's incantation. The mantra was transferred to the 4 seas freedom gourd, activating the magic power of the magic treasure. It could be said that the magic power of the magic treasure intertwined with each other. The treasured gourd began to move, and it began to break the restrictive spells set up by Taoist Blackwater bit by bit. Ah! Taoist Blackwater was shocked. Someone's after the gourd. Taoist Blackwater wouldn't have panicked over anything else. After all, he had lived for more than 500 years, so he had the mental fortitude to do so. But when it came to the gourd, he couldn't. This item was Taoist Blackwater's lifeblood. He couldn't afford to lose it. Anxious, he continued to cast his spell. But it was too late. With a loud rumble, the 4 seas freedom gourd shone brightly, breaking through the many barriers Taoist Blackwater had set up. It then broke through the ceiling of the cave and flew up. Come back! Taoist Blackwater shrieked. While he was horrified, he was also filled with hatred. Who was it? Who wanted to take away my treasure? For hundreds of years, Taoist Blackwater had treated the 4 seas freedom gourd as his personal property. He wouldn't allow anyone to lay a finger on it. It wasn't just him. Taoist Uwater was furious too. He too relied on the 4 seas freedom gourd to keep himself alive. If he lost this treasure, he wouldn't be able to live for more than a few years. The 2 old geezers immediately flew out in search of the 4 seas freedom gourd. However, the 4 seas gourd was imbued with powerful mana, so its speed was unbelievable. By now, the gourd had transformed into a streak of light, reaching the clouds in the blink of an eye and landing in Lin Jin's hand. Chapter 588. It's here. Lin Jin stared at the four seas gourd in his hand, overwhelmed with excitement. As if it had found its master, the gourd glowed with a watery glow as if it was overjoyed. It really is Master's artifact. Seeing the four seas gourd, Taoist Hu let out a long sigh. His eyes drifted as if he was reminiscing about something. Lin Jin had a special mantra to control the artifact. Without the Taoist around, the four seas gourd obviously acknowledged Lin Jin as its master. No one could compare to him in this aspect. Holding the four seas gourd in his hand, Lin Jin could immediately feel the wonders of this artifact. It was indescribably wonderful. However, at that moment, several furious roars came from below. "Who are you, you thief? How dare you steal my treasure?" Following the voice, Taoist Black Water flew up. Taoist Black Water was surrounded by a lot of black water, dragging his body through the air at an extremely fast speed. Behind him was an old Taoist who was riding on a flying snake fish. It was an imposing sight. And on land, at this time, a drought land crab beast appeared. This drought land crab beast's body was extremely huge. On its rock-like back, there were even flames rising up. It was big enough to seat 100 people. However, only a red-robed Taoist was glaring at Lin Jin and Taoist Hu above the clouds. So this is Taoist 3 Water. Lin Jin mumbled to himself as he stared at the three elderly Taoist figures. Although Taoist Hu rarely went out for hundreds of years, the Black Wind Cave and the Water God sect were both in Liangzhou, and they were considered neighbors. Taoist Hu more or less knew about the situation of his neighbors. Moreover, even if Taoist Hu didn't know, many of the hundreds of demon cultivators in the Black Wind Cave had dealt with the Water God sect, so they knew a lot of things. From the monsters, Lin Jin learned that the most powerful members of Water God cult were the three experts known as Taoist 3 Water. They were the first to third-generation Water God cult leaders. However, everyone assumed that the first and second-generation Water God cult leaders were dead. After all, they were figures from hundreds of years ago. No matter how powerful they were, they couldn't have lived for so long. Hence, the current Water God cult should only be led by the third generation's leader, Taoist Red Water. However, from the looks of it, the 3 Water Dao cultivators of the Water God sect were still alive. Moreover, the Four Seas Freedom Gourd had always been under the control of the Water God sect. While Lin Jin was deep in thought, the man from Black Water kept quiet. Wisps of black water gushed out of his body and condensed into a giant claw that swiped at Lin Jin and Taoist Hu. Impudent! Taoist Hu was enraged. He let out a tiger roar and raised his claw to attack. The two claws collided, creating a huge explosion. Black water splashed everywhere. They were actually evenly matched. At this time, Taoist Hu's expression slightly changed. He withdrew his hand and saw that the black liquid had corroded his skin. However, this wound quickly healed. The corrosive power of the black water wasn't weak at all. The black water that sprayed out of the water punctured the white cloud beneath Lin Jin's feet. Fortunately, it couldn't break through Lin Jin's 5 elemental armor. Clearly, the man from Black Water recognized Taoist Tiger. At this moment, his eyes turned sinister and his aged face revealed a shocked expression. "It's you. You're the Black Wind Cave's Black Wind Cave Master!" Taoist Black Water exclaimed. "You haven't changed at all. Sure enough, monsters are stronger than humans." Taoist Hu studied Taoist Black Water from head to toe. "So it's you, little Taoist. I haven't seen you for almost 500 years. You're still alive?" Back when Taoist Blackwater came to Liangzhou to establish the Water God sect, he once wanted to subdue the monsters of Black Wind Cave. Despite his confidence, he returned in defeat. He was defeated by Taoist Hu within 3 moves. Taoist Hu didn't kill him, merely humiliating him and chasing him away. After all, Taoist Hu was one of the 6 beasts. In a sense, he could be considered a Taoist. Taoist Blackwater was a Taoist too, so he was spared from death. Taoist Blackwater had never told anyone about this. From then on, the Water God sect didn't dare to enter Black Wind Cave's territory. Even after Taoist Blackwater's cultivation improved, he still kept his distance from Black Wind Cave. My Water God sect and Black Wind Cave have never interfered with each other. Why did you come to steal my sect's treasure? Taoist Blackwater knew that Taoist who wasn't someone to be trifled with. He could also tell that the one who stole the gourd was a very young man. Taoist Blackwater also noticed that Black Wind Cave's master was standing behind this young man, seemingly treating him as his master. Moreover, this young man's ability to take the gourd away through the air shocked Taoist Blackwater. But no matter what, he couldn't let go of this treasure. His life depended on it. Although Taoist Blackwater had reached the limit of his lifespan, if he had the gourd, living for a few more years wouldn't be a problem. In fact, if he could improve his cultivation, he could live even longer. However, without the gourd, Taoist Blackwater wouldn't be able to live much longer. Hence, there was no room for negotiation. He would fight anyone who tried to steal it. As they spoke, Taoist Yushui arrived on his flying snake. He was currently hovering nearby, glaring like a tiger at its prey, ready to fight to the death. Just like his master, Taoist Blackwater, he relied on the gourd to prolong his life. He would never let anyone take it away. Lin Jin glanced at the two elderly Taoists and shook his head. This isn't your Water God cult's treasure. Let me ask you, do you know what this treasure is called? Taoist Blackwater and Taoist Yushui obviously didn't. Lin Jin continued, this is the 4 Seas unfettered gourd that Taoist Lord hid at the foot of Mount Five Palms in Liangzhou. I've received Taoist Lord's inheritance, and I'm here to retrieve this treasure. Both of you may be lacking in cultivation, but you've managed to live so long because of the nourishment from this treasure's spiritual water essence. You've earned quite a bit, and now, it's time to return this item to its rightful owner. If I were you, I would know what's good for me and leave. Lin Jin kept his guard up as he spoke. Simply put, if Taoist Blackwater listened to his advice, Lin Jin wouldn't have caused any trouble. But if he didn't know what was good for him, and insisted on fighting for the 4 Seas unfettered gourd, Lin Jin wouldn't hold back. Having been through so much, Lin Jin was now a seasoned veteran. If the other party insisted on interrupting him, Lin Jin would strike first to gain the upper hand. Especially after the Water God cult had wreaked havoc in Liangzhou, Lin Jin was already thinking of eradicating them. You've gone too far. Taoist Blackwater cursed. Taoist Blackwater couldn't possibly give up in this situation. As a sly old fox, he knew he would have to make a move sooner or later. Hence, he had already sent Taoist Yushui and Taoist Redwater a telepathic message, instructing them to make a preemptive strike. To them, Black Wind Cave's master was the hardest to deal with, and no matter how skilled this young man was in spellcasting, his physique couldn't possibly be that strong. With the 3 of them working together, they should be able to kill this young man in an instant. After they reclaimed the gourd, even if Black Wind Cave's master was relentless in his pursuit, the 3 of them would fight if they could. If they couldn't, they would just run. With the treasure in their hands, they could go anywhere in the world. Chapter 589. The only problem was that the Water God cult that had been around for centuries might collapse. But that was fine. After living for so long, Blackwater Taoist had come to terms with many things. Strength and the ability to summon hundreds of followers paled in comparison to a long lifespan. Living longer was the most meaningful. Death was like an extinguished lamp. Hence, forget Black Wind Cave Master and this unknown kid. No matter how powerful someone was, even if that legendary Dowlord was here, Blackwater Taoist wouldn't back down. Kill! Blackwater Taoist was a veteran, so he wouldn't hesitate when it was time to make a decision. Blackwater Nether Beast, come out! Blackwater Taoist summoned his pet beast. 500 years ago, the Blackwater Taoist was a disciple of a declining Tao sect. However, he did not abide by the rules of the sect and schemed to steal a beast-taming talisman from that declining Tao sect. After that, he went to a dangerous place and used that beast-taming talisman to control a black water nether beast. This beast was one of the ferocious beasts of ancient times. If it weren't for the beast-taming amulet, Black Water Taoist wouldn't have been able to form a blood pact with it with his cultivation level. However, he was blessed with providence and succeeded. After centuries of cultivation, Black Water Taoist's Blackwater Nether Beast was now at the peak of rank 5. If it weren't for the fact that Black Water Taoist couldn't find a way to promote his pet beast to rank 6, he would have done so long ago. However, even at the peak of rank 5, to Black Water Taoist, his nether beast was the strongest among all rank 5 beasts. At this moment, he controlled the Blackwater Nether Beast to pounce over. It was like a black curtain covering the sky, or like a surging tide. The Blackwater Nether Beast turned into water and covered an area of 100 feet, pressing over with an earth-shattering momentum. The black water was highly toxic, and even a little bit of it would be fatal. Just this move alone was indeed amazing. Dragon Fire. Lin Jin's reflexes were quick. He cast the spell at the same time as his opponent. Opening his mouth, a ball of fire flew out. It was a sea of fire that covered the sky as well. Holy **T. Daoist who was watching from the back, was also stunned. He almost couldn't help but make a move. However, Daoist who was clear that his Imperial Wind technique would be suppressed when facing the Black Water Beast. His Imperial Wind technique wasn't as effective as his Imperial Fire technique. After all, fire and water were incompatible. With a rumble, water and fire collided. On Lin Jin's side, a raging inferno surged forward like a sea of fire. On the other side, the Black Water Man's side was a tidal wave of black water trying to extinguish the sea of fire. Neither the black water nor the dragon fire gave way to the other as they continuously collided and consumed each other. Their clothes fluttered, and it was evident how powerful this collision was. Xiaohua. Seeing that the water and fire attacks were in a stalemate, Lin Jin immediately cast a buff spell. A ball of flame shot out from Lin Jin's arm and shot toward Taoist Blackwater like a sharp blade. Halfway through, it transformed into a large firewolf, and was right before Taoist Blackwater in the blink of an eye, opening its jaws to bite. Blackwater Taoist shuddered in fear. He no longer had the time to be shocked by the young man's ability to multitask and release his pet beast to attack him. He screamed in fright and raised a black water shield with one hand, trying to block the firewolf's attack. However, under Xiaohua's bite, the black water shield was broken in the blink of an eye. If Taoist Yu Water hadn't intervened in time and controlled the flying snake to stop Xiaohua, the black water Taoist would have been devoured. A battle between rank 5 pet beasts was certainly earth-shattering. With Lin Jin's strength alone, he was able to hold his own against Taoist Blackwater and Yu Shui. In fact, Lin Jin was even slightly stronger than them. This was truly astonishing. Perhaps it was because he felt humiliated, or perhaps he wanted to cheer himself up. Blackwater Taoist bellowed, "I've been cultivating for 500 years, so how could I possibly lose to a kid like you?" Having said that, he let out a long howl and the surrounding black water seeped into Blackwater Taoist's body. Instantly, the latter's body expanded. His aged appearance now seemed to have turned 100 years younger. His eyes turned pitch black as he charged forward like an arrow, swinging his fist. Blackwater God Fist. This was Blackwater Taoist's famous ultimate technique in his early years. It was a combination of spells and martial arts, and now it had a backlash from the Blackwater Beast to strengthen his body. Clearly, this technique had its side effects, but Blackwater Taoist clearly couldn't care less. He had to get his gourd back as soon as possible or else he wouldn't be able to hold out much longer. Since he was going to die anyway, he didn't have any reservations. Admittedly, Black Water Taoist was fast and his ambush was executed beautifully. The Black Water God Fist carried a thick layer of black liquid as it smashed toward Lin Jin. Lin Jin could tell that Black Water Taoist was about to go all out. Although Lin Jin could sense danger approaching and knew that this attack was no small matter, it only served to motivate Lin Jin. If you want to go all out, then let's go all out. Lin Jin gathered his mana and raised his palm to strike. Sky's scorching palm. In an instant, the fist and palm collided. Lin Jin's palm was like a stream of fire, blazing like the sun. Sky's scorching palm lived up to its name. When this palm was launched, raging flames rippled outwards, burning the sky. Those who weren't strong enough would be instantly burned to death within 1,000 feet. The impact of this palm even reached the ground. Many of the Water God cult members below instantly cried out in pain. Smoke billowed out from some of the houses, and some were even set ablaze. According to the Daelord's divine book, Sky Scorching Palm was a supernatural technique that gathered the surrounding flames. In other words, the more flames there were, the more powerful the attack would be. Although Black Water Taoist's Black Water God Fist was by no means weak, it was clearly weaker than Sky Scorching Palm. Moreover, Lin Jin had already formed blood contracts with 2 rank 5 pet beasts. The flames were now tinged with the color of blood. Hence, Black Water Taoist was instantly defeated by Lin Jin. Ah! Black Water Taoist's expression changed drastically as he spat out a mouthful of black blood. Half of his body was set ablaze as he screamed in pain as he retreated. Defeated. As an expert who had been cultivating for 500 years, he was defeated today. And it was a complete defeat. This had nothing to do with cultivation time. Although Lin Jin hadn't been cultivating for a long time, he had gone through a lot of actual combat. On the other hand, although Black Water Taoist had lived for a long time, he had spent most of his time borrowing the power of the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd to prolong his last breath. Moreover, as time went on, Black Water Taoist became more and more afraid of death. All he could think of was how to extend his lifespan. As for cultivation and spells, he didn't spend much time studying them. Moreover, Black Water Taoist wasn't exactly outstanding when it came to comprehension. After clashing head-on with Lin Jin's Sky Scorching Palm, he was defeated. Although a ball of black water immediately gushed out of his body to extinguish the flames, he was already half dead. His aura had diminished and he no longer had the strength to fight. On the other side, Taoist Yu Water was controlling his flying snake to fight Xiaohua. Seeing his master's defeat, Taoist Yu Water's heart thumped wildly. He knew things weren't looking good. Chapter 590. Taoist Yu Water knew that in Water God cult, Master Blackwater's strength reigned supreme. His own strength could only match up to 80% of Master Blackwater's. Now that even his Master Blackwater had been defeated, he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Taoist Yu Water immediately flew over and saved Master Blackwater. He took out a pill and stuffed it into Master Blackwater's mouth. The latter's face was twitching from the pain, but after taking the pill, his condition visibly improved. Yu Water, Crimson Water, the enemy is here and Water God cult is on the brink of death. Use the 3 Water Beast fusion method immediately. This is our last chance. Having recovered some strength, Master Blackwater said fiercely. It seemed like he was going to fight for his life. Yes. Taoist Yu Water was a smart person. The enemy was too powerful. If they hesitated any longer, they might not even have the chance to fight for their lives. Activate the formation. Use the 3 Water Beast fusion method. Taoist Yu Water was decisive. Below, Crimson Water took out a talisman and activated it. In an instant, the surrounding sand quickly gathered to form a huge sand barrier, shielding above and around Water God cult. Before the sand could gather, Master Blackwater and Taoist Yu Water had already retreated into the formation. Seeing this, Lin Jin immediately gave chase. However, the sand formation was gathering so quickly that Lin Jin's hesitation only lasted for a moment before he was isolated outside the formation. This water god cult has been operating here for hundreds of years, so it's not surprising that they have such resources. Lin Jin mumbled to himself. Speaking of which, Lin Jin couldn't tell what was so special about this yellow sand formation. He had to admit that water god cult had some tricks up their sleeve. It's just a ball of sand. I'll break it. Impatient, Taoist Yu Water couldn't hold it in any longer. He transformed into his giant tiger form and his body grew to over 30 feet long. His huge and menacing head exuded a murderous aura. With a swipe of his 3-foot-long claws, several gusts of black wind condensed into wind-slashing claws. Several deep marks appeared on the yellow sand formation, showing just how powerful Taoist whose wind-splitting claw was. However, the yellow sand quickly gathered and filled up the deep marks, returning them to their original state. Taoist who refused to believe this and continued to ferociously attack, wanting to break the yellow sand formation. However, after a few attacks, the yellow sand formation was able to quickly repair itself. After attacking for so long, Taoist who felt like he was losing face. Blackwater Taoist, what's the point of you hiding in there? If you have the ability, come out. Taoist Tiger began cursing. This obviously had no effect. Blackwater Taoist wasn't the kind of fool who would come out to die just because of a few taunts and insult. Taoist who knew this very well. He could only stare helplessly at the sand formation and say to Lin Jin, who knew that water god cult would be so rich. He was referring to the yellow sand formation. Indeed, this yellow sand formation was amazing. Although it didn't have any offensive capabilities, its defensive capabilities were impressive. Truth be told, Lin Jin might not be stronger than Taoist, who in terms of offensive capabilities. If even Taoist who couldn't break this yellow sand formation, Lin Jin didn't think he could. Even Flame Blast wouldn't help. Within this great formation, the yellow sand constantly flowed. Once a part of it was broken, it would immediately be replenished from elsewhere. It could be said to be endless and continuous. Unless one could break through the yellow sand defense in one strike, the formation would always be replenished. Just as Taoist who said, water god cult had been operating in Liangzhou for centuries, so it was impossible for them not to have some sort of background. However, that was all. To Lin Jin, Blackwater Taoist's cultivation level was only SOSO. He wasn't that impressive, but his rank 5 pet beast was rather difficult to deal with. Its rarity and means were probably on par with the Ghost Blood beast. If Lin Jin didn't have 2 rank 5 pet beasts, dealing with Blackwater Taoist wouldn't have been so easy. What do we do now? I heard Blackwater Taoist say they're going to use some Tri-Water Beast fusion technique. Are we just going to wait for them to do that? Taoist who asked after another round of attacks to no avail. The Tri-Water Beast fusion spell didn't sound too promising. Although Lin Jin didn't know how this spell worked, the fact that Blackwater Taoist and the others used it as a last resort in times of crisis meant that it must be their greatest trump card. If he could stop this from happening, he would. Although Lin Jin was confident, he wasn't arrogant. Just then, Lin Jin sensed a ripple of energy. Stunned, he turned his head to look in the direction of the black wind tunnel. Brother Lin, what's wrong? Taoist who asked after noticing the anomaly. Lin Jin closed his eyes to sense it for a moment before saying, wonderful. I was just thinking about how to break this yellow sand formation. I thought I'd need an incredibly sharp blade to break through the yellow sand formation in an instant. And now I have this blade in my possession. Taoist who didn't quite understand what Lin Jin was saying. Just then, a sharp beam of light shot up into the sky from afar. Then, it flew over at an unbelievable speed. That's... Taoist whose eyes widened. After taking a closer look, he finally saw what it was. It was the breezy monster sword. However, The breezy monster sword that was flying over was completely different from the one Taoist who was familiar with. There was an indescribable sharpness emanating from this breezy monster sword. It was a wave of sword intent. A sky-piercing sword intent. It was as if it could cut through everything and was indestructible. With a flash of light, a breezy monster sword instantly appeared in Lin Jin's hand. Back in Black Wind Cave, when Lin Jin taught the breezy monster sword the heavenly sword scroll, the breezy monster sword fell into a mysterious state. Lin Jin knew that the monster sword was evolving, digesting the contents of the scroll. Now it must have achieved a breakthrough. Currently, the breezy monster sword in Lin Jin's hand was rippling with purple sword energy. The blade trembled as if expressing its gratitude. It had evolved. Lin Jin could clearly feel that the breezy monster sword had evolved. It was now on par with Xiao Shu Lu previously. The breezy monster sword's spirit was much weaker than Xiao Shu Lu. Seems like this heavenly sword scroll is very useful to you, Lin Jin murmured. Then, he flicked the sword. Go, cut open the yellow sand formation below. The thieves down there have committed many evil deeds. If they kneel and beg for mercy, I'll let them go. But if they resist, kill them. At Lin Jin's command, the breezy monster sword immediately let out a shrill cry. Then, it was unsheathed, drawing several sword beams in the air before piercing down. The yellow sand array also seemed to feel threatened. The surrounding yellow sand began to gather, and the thickness of the yellow sand in the entire array was astonishing. However, under the breezy monster sword's sharp aura, before the blade even reached the formation, a formless sword intent had already broken through half of the sand barrier. Chapter 591. Amazing! Taoist Tiger, who knew his stuff, was startled by this. If this monster sword were to kill someone in the future, all it had to do was unsheath its blade, and its aura would be able to kill someone hundreds of feet away. Instinctively, Taoist Tiger touched his neck. This was indeed frightening. The breezy monster sword was able to break through half of the sand barrier with its aura alone. In the blink of an eye, the blade pierced through the sand and entered the formation. Lin Jin had given a strict order so the breezy monster sword would do as he said. Once inside the formation, the blade glowed brightly and a voice rang out. Those who surrender shall live, and those who fight shall perish. These 6 short words carried a domineering aura that threatened to kill anyone who disobeyed. Most of the Water God cult members were intimidated by the sword aura and didn't dare to move. However, there were some powerful desperados who continued to act as they pleased. In particular, Black Water, Dark Water, and Crimson Water Taoist used their skills to attack the breezy monster sword. Slash! The Qingfeng demon sword's reaction was also very direct. A dazzling sword light flashed on the body of the sword, and then it slashed down from above. In an instant, a sword mark appeared on the ground. It was hundreds of feet long and hundreds of feet deep. Not only did it split the main hall of the Water God sect into 2, but it also killed many of the sect members who were resisting stubbornly. Crimson Water Taoist and his pet beast were the most miserable. Together with his pet beast, Crimson Water Taoist was cut into 2. Their bloody bodies fell to the ground and Crimson Water Taoist's eyes were still filled with disbelief. However, he could no longer find an answer. He was killed by this attack. His soul was obliterated and he couldn't be more dead. Ah! Not far away, Master Black Water and Master Serene Water were trembling in fear. Their triple water beast fusion technique had failed. How were they supposed to fuse their pet beast now that their pet beast was dead? Block that sword for me! Black Water bellowed. Many of the cult members rose to their feet and attacked. However, under the attack of the breezy monster sword, their attacks crumbled under the second attack. One of the cult members urged a pet beast that resembled a rhinoceros to charge forward. The rhinoceros pet beast was clad in a thick outer armor that looked like it was forged from metal. However, when the clear wind sword swept past, the rhinoceros was split into two. Its corpse fell to the ground, its internal organs spilling out. The same thing happened again and again in the following time. The members of the water god cult were known for their tyrannical ways of abusing the people. In terms of capabilities, they were quite capable. Quite a number of them had rank 3 pet beasts, and quite a number of them had rank 4 pet beasts as well. But at this moment, no matter who it was, no one was able to block the blade of the clear wind demon sword. Everyone screamed, cursed, and exclaimed. Then, the sound of swords rang out. In just a moment, the water god sect was already covered in corpses and blood flowed like a river. Taoist Qishui died in battle, killed by the sword. Although Taoist Yu Water managed to survive, one of his arms had already been chopped off. Taoist Black Water was the most sinister and cunning. He didn't make any moves, so he didn't attract the Qingfeng demon sword's attack. "Master, what do we do?" Taoist Yu Water asked anxiously as he clutched the wound on his severed arm. Clearly they had lost. There was no longer a chance for them to fight back. After Taoist Qishui was killed, they lost the possibility of using the Triwater Beast fusion technique. And in this short period of time, the demon's sword had been flying around, harvesting lives like the Grim Reaper. Many of their members were either injured or dead. It was no exaggeration to say that the Water God sect had been crippled. If they continued fighting, the outcome was obvious. Thus, Taoist Yu Water was implying that they should retreat first. As the saying went, where there's life, there's hope. How could Taoist Yu Water not understand this? However, he also knew that if Taoist Yu Water didn't have the gourd artifact, it wouldn't be a problem for him to live for another few decades. But he couldn't. It was fine if he didn't use too much of his power earlier. But now, he would be lucky to be able to live for several months. In fact, he might even have to count his days. With this, there was no difference between running and not running. Of course, Taoist Yu Water didn't plan to perish together. He had always been a meticulous man who would always prepare one or even more escape routes for himself. This was Taoist Yu Water's way of doing things. The fact that he was willing to accept a disciple was a way out for him. One had to know that the Beast of Three Waters fusion technique was his plan. In addition to this technique, there was actually another secret technique. However, he didn't tell anyone about this secret technique, including his disciple, Taoist Yu Water. "Yu Water, I'm old. Even if I escape, I won't be able to live for long. You should go. I'll help you fend off the strong enemies," said Taoist Blackwater. Then, he patted Taoist Yu Water's shoulder. Taoist Yu Water was very touched. However, before he could say his heartfelt words, he felt his body stiffen and he couldn't move. "What's going on?" Taoist Yu Water was horrified. He couldn't even speak now. He only felt that his body was cold, as if something was invading his flesh and blood. Taoist Yu Water tried to look with the corner of his eye. He was horrified to see that a stream of black water was seeping into Master Yu Water's body along his arm. In an instant, Taoist Yu Water thought of something and wanted to resist. However, no matter how much he urged his mana, tried to move his body, and tried to push his master away, it was useless. His body seemed to be filled with lead. A cold thing penetrated deep into his flesh, internal organs, and bones, depriving him of his senses. "Master! Master!" Taoist Yu Water finally tried to make a sound, but in the end there was no sound. Taoist Yu Water sneered. "Yu Water, don't blame Master. When I took you as my disciple and taught you my secret technique, I wanted to find a way out. Originally, I planned to take Qi Shui's body. After all, he was younger. However, who could have thought that he would be cut into two? So, I had no choice but to use you." After saying that, more black water gushed out of Taoist Yu Water's 7 orifices and rushed into Taoist Yu Water's mouth and nose. When everything quieted down, Taoist Yu Water's body fell to the ground with a bang, while Taoist Yu Water stood up again. Taoist Yu Water's expression had a strange smile, which was very similar to Taoist Yu Water's habit. It's a pity that I lost an arm, but it doesn't matter. As long as I can escape this time, there will be a time when I make a comeback. After saying that, Taoist Yu Water looked at his corpse on the ground, then turned around and went into a hole, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The yellow sand array was broken. The clear wind demon sword had killed more than 10 cultivators who were maintaining the needle technique. For something like an array formation, as long as a few key points were destroyed from the inside, it would immediately collapse. It was like tearing down the pillars of a great hall. The result would be a direct collapse. Chapter 592. The yellow sand formation was broken. Looking at the interior of the water god cult, it was already a mess. There were sword marks everywhere which could split the ground. There were countless corpses. These were the people who had resisted stubbornly. As for those who knelt on the ground, they had survived. However, they were already trembling with fear. Even if they were lucky enough to survive today, they would never dare to commit crimes again. The breezy monster sword hovered in the air. The disciples who dared to resist had all been killed. Among them were some monsters who had defected to water god cult. Other than that, Lin Jin also saw a gold and silver tower. They were truly made out of gold and silver, a testament to the wealth that water god cult had plundered from the people over the centuries. Lin Jin landed. With a wave of his hand, the breezy monster sword turned into a ray of light and flew into his hand. Sheathing the sword, the sharp aura it exuded disappeared. The sword hung on Lin Jin's waist. It looked ordinary, but anyone could tell that it was a deadly weapon. Truth be told, even Lin Jin was shocked. After studying the Divine Path sword scroll, the breezy monster sword seemed to have evolved as if it had been reborn. This sword alone was on par with a top-notch rank 5 pet beast. From a certain perspective, it could even be said to be stronger than a rank 5 pet beast. Because it was a sword. A sword was meant to kill. Basically, none of the rank 5 pet beasts in this world could compare to the breezy monster sword. Lin Jin was satisfied. Based on simple addition and subtraction, he now had the combat strength of 3 rank 5 pet beasts. It wasn't that Lin Jin was boasting, but even if he had to face the corpse cultivator alone, he wouldn't have to be afraid. Xiaohua could attack and defend well. The ghost blood beast could buff him and focus on defense. As for the breezy monster sword, it went without saying that it was Lin Jin's strongest offensive weapon. However, Lin Jin planned to hang the breezy monster sword on Curator's waist. But that wasn't an issue. What belonged to his master was his. Moreover, he had the sky's scorching palm, 5 elemental armor, and the newly acquired 4 seas gourd. In terms of skills and supernatural powers, Lin Jin was no match for anyone. Priest Blackwater and Priest Crimson Water's corpses were quickly found, but Priest Yu Water was nowhere to be found. He must have escaped, Priest Tiger said. So be it. Lin Jin wasn't too bothered by this. While Master Blackwater's cultivation level was decent, Taoist Yu Shui was far from it. Even if he escaped, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Lin Jin chased away the remaining members of Water God Cult. These people had been scared out of their wits and were either injured or crippled. Since they had fled for their lives, they were no longer a threat. The huge Water God sect actually collapsed within a day and was destroyed just like that. Lin Jin retrieved the 4 seas gourd as he wished. However, Lin Jin still had to refine this treasure for a while before he could use it, because after getting his hands on it, Lin Jin could tell that this 4 seas unrestrained gourd was a level higher than the immortal binding rope. In short, it was a very powerful item. Having achieved his wish, Lin Jin immediately returned to Black Wind Cave with Taoist Hu. He wanted to find a safe place to study the 4 seas freedom gourd in seclusion, and Black Wind Cave seemed like a good choice. While Lin Jin was studying the 4 seas freedom gourd, Master Blackwater, who had taken over Taoist Yoshue's body, had already escaped from Liangzhou's territory. Master Blackwater didn't dare to head to Zhongzhou either. He continued westward and entered Grassy Continent. Further west, he entered Black Mountain's territory. Black Mountain's territory was outside of Zhongzhou's territory. To the people of Zhongzhou, this was considered extraterritorial. The extraterritorial territory was even more desolate than Grassy Continent and Liangzhou. Be it the mountains or plains, it was more treacherous. The mountains were treacherous, the forests were treacherous, and the miasma lingered in the air for tens of thousands of years. There were almost no signs of human habitation. In addition, the extraterritorial territory was home to more ferocious and bloodthirsty beasts. Even experts who dared to trespass into the extraterritorial territory would either be poisoned to death by the overwhelming miasma or be devoured by one of the terrifying beasts. Without hesitation, Master Blackwater covered his mouth and nose with a layer of black water before barging in. The Blackwater nether beast could isolate the miasma so that Master Blackwater wouldn't be harmed. This was because Master Blackwater was the one who brought the Blackwater nether beast back from the extraterritorial territory. Just you wait. I, Master Blackwater, will definitely get my revenge. Master Blackwater gritted his teeth as he hurried on his way. He had been on tenterhooks the entire time, afraid that his pursuers would notice him. After all, that monster sword was too terrifying. So, Master Blackwater's continuous escape had cost him half his life. In fact, he was in a terrible situation. Although he had managed to escape, Master Blackwater's body was old to begin with, and he had lost an arm. If he could linger on, Master Blackwater could live for another 10 years. However, 10 years was nothing to Master Blackwater, who had lived for more than 500 years. For the sake of survival and revenge, Master Blackwater had no choice but to take the risk and enter the extraterritorial territory again. Fortunately, he was familiar with this place and the Blackwater nether beast could help him resist the terrifying miasma here. He wasn't here to seek refuge. If he was here to seek refuge, there were too many places to hide in the vast world. Master Blackwater was here to extend his life and also to seek revenge. The Tao sect that he had been in was also located in the extraterritorial territory. 500 years ago, the Blackwater Taoists stole the beast-taming talisman from the Taoist sect and never dared to step into this place again. However, after 500 years, the Blackwater Taoist felt that the Taoist sect should have vanished into thin air. After all, the Black Mountain area was so dangerous. The Taoist sect that was already dilapidated and had a small population might have been wiped out. Even if it wasn't, there would only be a few old and weak people left. Master Blackwater felt that he could definitely deal with them. This time, Master Blackwater returned to hunt for a few other treasures in the Tao sect. These treasures were even more powerful than the beast-taming talisman that he had risked his life to steal. If he could get his hands on them, Master Blackwater was confident that he could kill his way back and destroy the Black Wind Cave. The Black Mountain area was filled with miasma. With the protection of the Blackwater nether beast, Master Blackwater spent a lot of time and suffered a lot before he reached a valley. This valley was filled with miasma. If one wanted to step in, regardless of whether it was a man or a beast, they would come out in a daze. It was difficult to really enter. Sometimes, as they walked, they would hit a wall and their faces would be covered in dust. This was because there was a special restriction in the valley. Master Blackwater had been in this hidden Tao sect for 10 years, so he knew the method to enter. Blackwater wandered around the entrance of the valley twice, and found a blade of grass and a twin-leaf flower in the surrounding forest. He crushed them and sprinkled them on his body. After chanting a string of incantations, he strode forward. The special thick miasma at the entrance of the valley immediately opened up a path for Master Blackwater to enter. Chapter 593. The restriction really hasn't changed. Blackwater Taoist sneered in his heart. Changing the restriction wasn't an easy task. Back then, this Taoist sect was already on the verge of collapse. How could anyone change the restriction to enter the valley? That was why Blackwater Taoist was so confident. After stepping into the valley, everything became clear. There was no longer any miasma. It was like a paradise. There were houses and farmland in this valley. It looked more like a small mountain village. However, there were weeds everywhere. It was a mountain village that had been abandoned for many years. Blackwater Taoist was extremely careful at this moment. He knew how dangerous this place was because he had lived here for 10 years. Even if the person here looked very ordinary, his strength was much more powerful than the first-rate experts outside. Blackwater Taoist was extremely cautious. He was familiar with the grass and trees here. He also knew that there were many restrictions here. For example, the wooden bridge in front of him actually had a worm leaf saber array. Those who didn't know would be killed by the almost invisible worm leaf saber array halfway. There were many such things. Blackwater Taoist walked around and observed. After confirming that there was no one else in this Taoist sect, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he laughed maniacally. I originally planned to come here in a few years to plunder. I didn't expect to encounter a strong enemy. But it's fine. This time, I'll take all the treasures in this Taoist sect. Then, I'll kill my way back and take back the gourd. After saying that, Blackwater Taoist walked into a small hall. There were several generations of ancestors of the Taoist sect enshrined here. There were portraits of them and offerings on display. However, because no one had taken care of it for a long time, the hall was dilapidated and covered in dust. There were a few paintings, but they didn't have the charm they had in the past. Humph! Taoist Blackwater raised his head and snorted. So what if the Divine Machine sect was glorious in the past? In the end, there was no one to inherit it and it was destroyed. After saying that, Blackwater Taoist thought for a moment and walked over. He actually knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the ancestors of the Divine Machine sect. Although I, Blackwater, stole the talisman and left, it's not considered a traitor. Strictly speaking, I'm still a disciple of the Divine Machine sect. Now I'm the only one left in the Divine Machine sect. Therefore, it's only right for me to take the inheritance of the Divine Machine sect. Ancestors, please bless me. After saying that, Taoist Blackwater bowed a few more times before getting up. The Divine Secret sect was most proficient in array formations. The poisonous miasma formation around the valley, the insect leaf saber formation in some parts of the valley, and even the yellow sand formation that the people of the Blackwater River had learned to protect the Water God sect were all from the Divine Machine sect. It was said that during the ancient era of the Immortal Tao, the Divine Secrets Gate could be considered an impressive legacy of the Immortal Tao. However, just like the other immortal sects, the Divine Secrets Gate also declined. However, the Divine Machinations Gate chose to continue its inheritance in the Black Mountain domain of the Outer Realm. In the beginning, it was only established by some marginal disciples. Later, as time passed, many of them died in battle or exhausted their lifespans. Since there were no new disciples, it was not surprising that the Divine Machinations Gate completely declined. Blackwater Taoist had said that he was the only remaining successor of the Divine Machine sect, and this might be true. Behind the small hall was a special building that could not be seen from the outside. Only by unlocking the special formation could one see it. The Blackwater Taoist had cultivated with Taoist Yuehua of the Divine Machine sect in the past. The latter had treated him well and taught him everything he knew. Therefore, the Blackwater Taoist knew a lot of the Divine Machine sect's secret. It took him some effort this time, but the Blackwater Taoist still managed to unlock the formation and open the door. Behind the door was the treasury of the Divine Machine sect. There were cultivation methods, array diagrams, elixirs, magic tools, and Dharma treasures. Of course, even if the door was opened, Each item had its own restriction. Therefore, although there were many things here, the Black Water Taoist could only take a few of them. Damn it! It has already been buried. Yet they still sealed it so tightly? I wonder what the old bastards from the Divine Contingency sect were thinking. Taoist Blackwater tried a few times to no avail. After failing to open the restrictive barrier and retrieve the treasures, he began cursing. If a thief entered the treasury but couldn't take most of the things, one could imagine how angry and annoyed the thief would be. The Blackwater Taoist was feeling the same way. He tried for a long time and finally opened the restriction of a treasure. It was a pitch-black iron glove with sharp fingers and a hunting blade on the back. The whole thing emitted a black aura that looked like ash. Just by looking at it, one could tell that it was extremely evil. However, the more evil it was, the more Blackwater Taoist liked it. It must be an amazing Dharma treasure. The Blackwater Taoist was extremely excited. After he tried his best to open the restriction, he suddenly heard a rumble. The sound echoed through the sky, giving him a fright. What's going on? He took a few steps back like a bird startled by the twang of a bough. He waited for a while, but nothing happened, so he was slightly relieved. He walked over and took the iron claw glove off. The Blackwater Taoist was extremely pleased. Just as he was about to study how to use the Dharma treasure, a loud noise suddenly came from outside. Then, the sky and earth shook. The Blackwater Taoist's heart was beating wildly. He immediately ran out to check and saw a figure standing at the entrance of the valley in the distance. The figure was quite tall. Even through the thick miasma, he could still see it quite clearly. This made the Blackwater Taoist extremely frightened. It must be known that the Divine Armament sect was located in a foreign land, a death zone filled with poisonous miasma. Ordinary people and even some birds and beasts wouldn't dare to come here. The only ones who could survive here were some terrifying monsters, as well as Tao sects like the Divine Armament sect. Could it be someone from other Tao sects? The Blackwater Taoist thought to himself. Although he had not seen anyone from other Tao sects in the 10 years he had been cultivating here, he had heard from his master that the Divine Armament sect was not the only sect in the foreign lands who was taking refuge here. Although the Blackwater Taoist had lived for 500 years, there were still many things he did not know. For example, he did not know which other Tao sects were hiding in the depths of the foreign lands, nor did he know what his master meant by taking refuge. While he was thinking, the Blackwater Taoist's eyes were fixed on the figure at the entrance of the valley. Logically speaking, he should be able to see the outside from the inside. However, due to the formation, the people outside could not see what was happening inside the valley. However, at that moment the figure stretched out his hand and grabbed. Then, the formation guarding the valley was forcefully torn open. The scene made the Blackwater Taoist break out in a cold sweat. There was no need to mention the fear in his heart. The poisonous miasma formation guarding the valley was said to have been set up by an almighty from the Divine Armament sect 1,000 years ago. In the eyes of the Blackwater Taoist, no one could break it with external force. However, today, what he thought was impossible had really happened in front of him. How could he not be afraid? Chapter 594. The person outside walked in at that moment. Upon closer inspection, it was a Taoist who was 8 feet tall and had a stern expression. The Taoist wore a crown with 3 skulls and 100 towers. His face was long and he had a long beard. He wore a black robe and held a horsetail whisk in his hand. His aura was suffocating. The Taoist immediately noticed the Blackwater Taoist as soon as he entered. The Taoist said in surprise, "There's someone else in the Divine Contingency Gate?" The Taoist's figure flashed and instantly appeared in front of the Blackwater Taoist. The Blackwater Taoist did not dare to move in front of the Taoist. He knew very well that the Taoist was much more powerful than his master. The Taoist might even be a legendary immortal. Therefore, the Taoist reacted quickly. He immediately knelt on the ground and bowed. Disciple of the Divine Contingency Gate, Black Water, greets senior expert. Keeping a low profile was the only way to survive. The Black Water Taoist knew this well. The black-robed Taoist remained expressionless. He only glanced at the Taoist and asked, "Is there anyone else in your Black Water Taoist?" The Taoist quickly shook his head. "No, I'm the only one left." The Taoist sighed. This is the fall of the immortal path. The all-powerful Divine Contingency Gate has declined just like that. It's truly unpredictable. However, the Divine Contingency Gate sure knows how to hide. You're actually hiding in this valley. If not for the demonic artifact breaking out of the formation and revealing its aura, I wouldn't have been able to detect it. He looked at the black iron glove in the Taoist's hand. The Taoist was quite quick-witted. Although he was very reluctant, he did not hesitate to respectfully offer the black glove with both hands. You're quite perceptive," the old Taoist priest said as he stretched out his hand to take it. Then, he smiled and said, "This is a good item." Back then, the Ghost Hand Demon Lord's famed magical treasure was forged from nether ghost iron and the souls of tens of thousands of people. Its power was boundless. Later on, the Demon Lord was killed by the Divine Contingency Sect's Taoist Master Miracle Hand. The Taoist was talking to himself, but the Taoist was dumbfounded. While he was frightened, he was also overwhelmed with emotions. He suddenly discovered an opportunity to reach the peak and embark on the supreme path. The Taoist immediately made a decision. He knelt down again and kowtowed. The old Taoist was stunned. He squinted at the man from the Black Water River and asked, "What are you doing?" Taoist Blackwater hurriedly said, "Senior, the Divine Contingency Sect has fallen. Now that I've seen your immortal glory, I'm filled with admiration. I'm willing to offer everything in the Divine Contingency Sect to you. I only hope that you can take pity on me and accept me as your disciple." Then, he kowtowed again. Taoist Blackwater had thought far ahead. First of all, he had given up everything in the Divine Armament Sect. This was because he couldn't protect it at all. Instead of that, he might as well give it away first. This way, he might be able to gain some goodwill for himself. There was also the matter of apprenticeship. On one hand, Blackwater Taoist wanted to find a more powerful backer, and on the other hand, he wanted to save himself. The old Taoist in front of him did not look like a good person. Even if the old Taoist killed him and took everything from the Divine Machine Sect, what could the Blackwater Taoist do? Stop him? That was courting death. Hence, only by begging to be apprenticed would he have a chance of survival. After all, if he didn't do this, the old Taoist would most likely kill him. Blackwater Taoist was an evil man, and this old Taoist wasn't a good person either. There was no mistake in judging others by their own standard. Sure enough, Blackwater Taoist had just taken a trip to the gates of hell. The old Taoist stared at Blackwater for a long time before his murderous aura dissipated. "Kid, you're quite sensible. That's good too. Now that the immortal and demonic sects can only linger on in the foreign lands, it's getting harder and harder to recruit disciples who dare not step foot into Middle-earth. That damned immortal devouring beast. Forget it, let's not talk about it. Come back with me." Blackwater Taoist was beyond excited. But whether it was real or not, he didn't know. Maybe it was real. Or maybe it was just an act. But there was no doubt that Blackwater Taoist had discovered a whole new world. He was now certain that this new master of his was an immortal. Black Wind Cave. Inside Taoist whose cave abode, Lin Jin had a room to himself. The stone room was currently humid and the walls were covered in dew. Apart from that, there was also a lot of water spirit energy floating in the air. Some of them took the form of tiny water dragons, while others took the form of fishes and prawns. These were the supernatural powers of the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. They weren't real living creatures or water spirit. Right now, Lin Jin was studying the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. To him, this was a true magical artifact. It was more than one realm higher than the immortal binding rope. It was precisely because of this that Lin Jin still hadn't found a way to completely refine this magical artifact. Only by completely refining it could he use all of its supernatural powers. Otherwise, he would end up like Black Water Taoist, using the Four Seas Freedom Gourd to nourish his body and extend his lifespan. That was all. Lin Jin had once taken out the water reservoir armor to see if there was a connection between the two treasures. But it was clearly wishful thinking. In the end, Lin Jin made no progress after one day and night. At least, it wasn't the progress he had in mind. On the second night, Lin Jin only snapped out of his daze when the visitation hall's doors opened. He had completely forgotten about the visitation hall. Recently, the visitation hall was rather quiet. The visitors were all familiar faces, and most of them were here to ask about beast appraisals or to chat about recent developments. Zhao Jingyan of Phoenix Palace had regained control of Phoenix Palace and gained the support of several elders. Now, she was on the rise again. Of course, consolidating Phoenix Palace wasn't something that could be done overnight, but it was foreseeable that Phoenix Palace's rise would be a major event in the near future. And then there was Feng Ziqian. The kid had been living comfortably recently. Due to curator's support, Feng Ziqian was gradually being put in an important position by Emperor Feng Junwu. His marriage with the Thousand Island Kingdom's princess had also been settled. To others, Feng Ziqian was already half a step into the throne. As long as he didn't court death, it wouldn't be a problem for him to become Emperor Tianxian in a few years. Although Lin Jin had left Tianxian Royal City, the legacy he and curator left behind was enough to bring Feng Ziqian immense benefit. For example, because of Lin Jin, the entire Tianxian Academy was now on Feng Ziqian's side. This was a force that shouldn't be underestimated. It could even be the key to success or failure. After all, the Academy included the transcendent existence known as Miniature Library. He Qing, Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, Madame Ghostchild, Old Tian, Jiang Ziki, and the others didn't have any special matters to attend to. However, Yi Yuzhou would always ask curator when appraiser Lin would return to the Jade Dragon Kingdom and Maple City. Yi Yuzhou wasn't the only one who wanted to know. Jade Dragon Kingdom's emperor, He Qian, was probably yearning for Lin Jin's return as well. Chapter 595. After all, everyone knew that Lin Jin was now a rank 4 beast appraiser. As long as he returned to the Jade Dragon Kingdom, it would only take some time before Jade Dragon Kingdom became a premium country once again. However, Lin Jin wasn't in a hurry. Seeing that it was time for the visitation hall's reopening, Lin Jin pondered for a moment before putting the Four Seas Freedom Gourd away and stepping inside. He had made up his mind. He would ask around once he entered the visitation hall. If there wasn't anything else, he planned to come out earlier. This way, he could continue studying the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. However, when Lin Jin put on the curator's mask and entered the visitation hall, he was stunned. Because the scene in the visitation hall was far beyond Lin Jin's expectations. On the ground were a few people. They were Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, and the others. He Qing was tending to them while Madame Ghostchild seemed injured. Old Tian was sprawled on the ground, unmoving. Feng Ziqian stood behind Zhao Jingyan and argued with the two people in front of him. Zhao Jingyan's face was filled with anger, but also fear and helplessness. What was going on? Under the mask, Lin Jin frowned. Standing opposite him were two people, a man and a woman. Both were dressed in long robes and exuded a powerful aura. The man had a giant berserk lion by his side, while the woman had nothing around her. She was alone. They were different. These two were different from the others. Although at first glance, they looked like they had 2 arms and 2 legs, upon closer inspection, one would notice something special about them. Be it their clothes or hair, they were untainted by the mundane world. At that instant, Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat as he recalled a phrase. Immaculate body. Lin Jin had read Taoist scriptures before. He had also studied books from the ancient era of immortals. He knew that after becoming an immortal, one would have to undergo a lightning tribulation to attain an immaculate body. It was also known as an immaculate immortal body. This was the biggest difference between immortals and mortals. That was how Lin Jin felt when he saw these two newcomers. However, based on the situation, it seemed like a conflict had just broken out. These thoughts only flashed through her mind for a split second. In fact, when Lin Jin pushed open the curator's iron door and entered the visitation hall, He Qing was the first to notice him and ask for his help. Curator, we didn't do anything. These two newbies attacked us the moment they arrived. He Qing looked as if she had found her pillar of support and hurriedly complained. Everyone including Black Crow, Madame Ghostchild, Yi Yuzhou, Zhao Jingyan, and Feng Ziqian breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Curator, let alone He Qian. They were obviously extremely nervous before this. The reality of the situation was also obvious. They had so many people, but they were actually no match for those two people. Moreover, based on Lin Jin's observation, there was only one person who did this. He single-handedly suppressed experts like Yi Yuzhou, Black Crow, and Madame Ghostchild. He was not afraid of Zhao Jingyan at all. In this world, other than immortals, there was no other existence with such godly might. But Lin Jin was puzzled. Weren't immortals all extinct? The only immortal Lin Jin had ever met was the one from Daluo Temple. But after hiding for 1,000 years, that immortal was still destroyed by a rank 9 immortal devouring beast. But even then, Lin Jin understood the might of an immortal. It could be said that other than that perverted immortal devouring beast, immortals were the most powerful beings in this world. But didn't immortals only exist in legends and books? Why would they come to his visitation hall? For a moment, Lin Jin's mind was in a complete mess. But no matter what, Lin Jin had to figure out the situation first. Also, Lin Jin was a little angry. Whether or not these two newbies were immortals aside, even if they were, they had to behave themselves in the visitation hall and act according to his rules. In fact, when Curator appeared, the two immortals immediately turned to look at him. Lin Jin had once read that immortals' eyes glowed with divine light. Now, it seemed like it was true. It was Lin Jin's first time going up against immortals, not to mention two at once. Even in the visitation hall, Lin Jin felt as if he was facing a formidable foe. Hence, with every step Lin Jin took, his aura increased exponentially. It wasn't just his own, but he was also borrowing the museum's power to strengthen himself. Only then could he suppress them. The two immortals frowned as well. They were pulled into this strange place out of the blue, so they thought they were under attack. Hence, they had been on guard ever since they arrived. Upon seeing the others, one of the immortals attacked and defeated them all. Of course, not all of them. At least among these mortals, there was a woman who was quite capable. She managed to fend them off with her pet beast. These people told them that this place was called the Visitation Hall, and the owner of this place was known as Curator. He was a contemporary expert. Upon hearing this, the two immortals sneered, completely disdainful. In the eyes of immortals, mortals were nothing but ants. Although the two immortal sects they belonged to had long since hidden in the depths of the Black Mountain in the outer regions due to a huge incident 1,000 years ago, and had not set foot in Central Plains for 1,000 or 2,000 years, 2,000 or 3,000 years were just a little bit of time in the eyes of immortals. In their eyes, they had never treated mortals as anything. The two immortals thought it would be fine if the so-called curator didn't show up. But if he did, they would capture him and interrogate him about what kind of evil tricks he used to transport them here. And now the curator was here. The male immortal sneered. "What curator? You're just trying to be mysterious. Come here." As he spoke, the male immortal reached out and grabbed at the air, as if trying to grab the curator. An invisible force immediately enveloped Lin Jin. Truth be told, Lin Jin was startled too. Although he wasn't weak, he was still intimidated by a real immortal. It was just that it was impossible for him to keep the peace. The other party was a rash person who would make a move as soon as they arrived. If this important matter was captured, the curator would lose all face. Hence, while Lin Jin looked like he wasn't moving, he had in fact channeled all the museum's power into his body. More importantly, he was now wearing the real curator's mask. In addition, Lin Jin secretly channeled his strength. If he was still captured like this, Lin Jin would admit defeat. The next moment, the male immortal's mana touched Lin Jin. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed Lin Jin. The force was so strong that it was suffocating. However, this feeling only lasted for a split second before an even stronger force shattered the male immortal's mana. Chapter 596. A look of disbelief appeared on the male immortal's face. As if he had been hit by an invisible force, he stumbled back 4 steps. At the same time, the male immortal felt the blood in his body ripple. His throat felt dry and he almost spat out a mouthful of immortal blood. Fortunately, he wanted to save face. If he spat it out, he wouldn't have the face to live anymore. Especially in front of the famous Yun Shang, he couldn't afford to lose face. Hence, even if he had to risk his life, the male immortal forcefully swallowed the mouthful of blood. However, his expression didn't look too good. Just as he was about to order the large liger beast beside him to step forward, he realized that the liger beast was also fearful. It was actually retreating, its hind legs trembling. At that moment, Chen Xiankong didn't dare to say anything else. The female immortal who had been watching from the beginning to the end was shocked. She clearly knew the male immortal and knew his background. Chen Xiankong was an immortal of the Xian Dao sect. Among the sects hidden in Black Mountain, he was considered one of the top ones. Who would have thought that the curator would defeat Chen Xiankong the moment he appeared? The curator didn't even have to do anything. What kind of supernatural power was this? She couldn't believe it. At this moment, Fairy Yun Shang, who was originally cold and arrogant, subconsciously retracted her arrogance and lowered her posture a little. This was purely a form of respect. Yun Shang knew that Chen Xuankong's abilities were on par with hers. If this mysterious curator could injure Chen Xiankong without batting an eyelid, it wouldn't be difficult for him to take care of her. Perhaps he was a great immortal like her master. If that was the case, she had to give him the respect he deserved. At this thought, Yun Shang reacted quickly. She stepped forward and performed a Taoist sect etiquette. Cloud Path Immortal Sect's 34th generation's chief disciple, Qin Yun Shang, greets senior curator. His tone was gentle, and he spoke with the attitude of a junior. Although it was a simple greeting, it was enough to show that the curator had gained the female immortal's approval. Lin Jin wasn't the only one who understood this. Everyone else, including He Qing, Black Crow, and Yi Yuzhou, understood this as well. In fact, Lin Jin was sweating profusely just now, but he was satisfied with the result. As expected, I call the shots in my territory. This is the visitation hall, so even immortals have to behave themselves. In a man's territory, dragons must coil up and tigers must lie down. That's right, I'm the visitation hall. Lin Jin's confidence soared. He asked coldly, "Why did you hurt him?" As he spoke, Lin Jin walked over to check on their injuries. Old Tian was knocked out and his pet beast was badly injured. Fortunately, they were in the visitation hall, so Lin Jin was able to wake old Tian up with a simple trick. Then, with a wave of his hand, a colorful mist sprayed out to heal the injured humans and pet beast. A shocking scene occurred. Both the man and the pet beast were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Upon seeing this scene, Qin Yunshang's eyes lit up. Even Chen Xiankong was shocked, and fear covered his face. Even they couldn't do it. Not to mention them, even their master couldn't do it. This kind of healing technique was simply inconceivable. Little did they know that this was the Four Seas Freedom Gourd's innate ability. It was also the most powerful skill Lin Jin could use with this artifact. Any more and Lin Jin might not be able to do it. But even so, it was enough for Lin Jin to put on an act. Chen Xiankong came to his senses as well. He would be too stupid if he didn't come to his senses after experiencing this. How could someone who could cultivate to become an immortal be so stupid? Chen Xiankong immediately bowed. Greetings, Senior. Xian Immortal Sex 36th Generation Head Disciple, Chen Xiankong. I didn't know what was going on and offended you. Please punish me. As for hurting you, that was purely a misunderstanding. Chen Xiankong forced himself to speak. Come to think of it, it really was a misunderstanding that he had hurt the other visitors. Misunderstanding? Lin Jin clearly didn't believe him. But once he understood the situation, he sighed helplessly, musing that it really was a misunderstanding. Although Chen Xiankong was hot-tempered and arrogant, he wasn't the type to hurt someone on the spur of the moment. Also, with his cultivation level, if he really did get physical, the other visitors wouldn't just be injured. After all, anyone would be nervous and suspicious after being pulled into the visitation hall out of the blue. If they weren't careful, a fight might break out. Back then, didn't Yi Yuzhou and Madame Ghostchild get into a fight because of this? According to the visitation hall's rules, newcomers had to be educated. Old Tian was the one who suggested this because he was the one who had been taught a lesson back then. This time, they finally noticed that there were newcomers. Doors 11 and 12 were pushed open at the same time and a person walked in. At that time, Old Tian was very excited. He wanted to show off his status as a veteran, so he volunteered to put on an act. However, this depended on who he was dealing with. It was one thing to deal with a regular expert, but one could imagine what would happen if they tried to put on airs in front of a proper immortal. With just one move, Chen Xiankong defeated Old Tian, which led to the subsequent battle. In the end, Chen Xiankong single-handedly suppressed all the other visitors. Had it not been for Curator's timely arrival, who knew what would have happened? Lin Jin had been listening from the beginning to the end. The expression under his mask was one of utter helplessness. Regardless, things weren't at the point where they couldn't be cleaned up yet. He needed to learn more about these two newcomers. Lin Jin was too curious about them. Weren't immortals extinct? Why did they appear again? Where were they hiding then? Also, from what Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong said, they each had their own school of immortality, which still existed. Incredible! This was big news. When Lin Jin realized this, his heart pounded with excitement. It couldn't be helped. If immortal schools really existed, the current state of affairs would be overturned. In front of an immortal, a high-class country was not worth mentioning at all. Lin Jin was curious but he couldn't show it. An expert had to act like one. Hence, Lin Jin woke Old Tian up to treat his injuries and mediate the conflict between the two parties. After all, it wasn't a deep grudge. With Curator's name, there was no way the two parties wouldn't disrespect him. However, while the conflict had been resolved, the grudge was still there. Since it couldn't be resolved anytime soon, Lin Jin couldn't be bothered. He couldn't wait to start asking about the two immortals and their corresponding immortal sections. It wasn't just Lin Jin. Yi Yuzhou and the others were getting more and more impatient as well. The extinction of immortals happened a year or two ago. There shouldn't be any immortals left in this world now. Hence, they perked up their ears, eager to learn the truth. One could imagine how explosive this truth was. Chapter 597. The ancient path of immortals had once flourished for 100,000 years. But after the fall of immortals, there were very few historical records regarding this incident. Even if there were, it was only briefly mentioned. No one wrote about it in detail, so the later generations knew very little. The fall of immortals became an unsolved mystery. Of course, Lin Jin knew more. He knew that the main cause of the fall of immortals was most likely that rank 9 immortal devouring beast. Until now, the immortal devouring beast had yet to reveal its true form. Lin Jin only saw a giant claw back at Daluo Temple. Based on the information collected from various sources, the truth of the matter had been revealed. Thousands of years ago, the rank 9 immortal devouring beast appeared and attacked immortal sects indiscriminately, killing immortals. This cruel war may have lasted for centuries. In the end, the immortals were defeated and the path of immortals fell. This was what Lin Jin knew. There might be a small number of immortals who survived, such as the immortal from Daluo Temple. However, they could only hide and conceal their auras. Because once their immortal aura was exposed, the rank 9 immortal devouring beast would be attracted and death would be their only outcome. Hence, Lin Jin assumed that there were no more immortals left in this world. Even more extreme speculations were that the immortal from Daluo Temple was the last. But now 2 immortals had come to the visitation hall. One could only imagine how much of an uproar this had caused. After Lin Jin questioned them, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong explained the situation to him. It turned out that when the rank 9 immortal devouring beast went on a rampage 2,000 years ago, a small number of immortal sects with foresight had already begun preparing for their retreat. Since they were no match for the immortal devouring beast, they could only flee. The problem was, where could they flee to? The edge of each continent was known as the extraterritorial lands. The extraterritorial lands were filled with endless miasma and were extremely dangerous. Since ancient times, it had been a forbidden area. Mortals and beasts could never enter. If they did, they would instantly be poisoned to death by the miasma unless they had some sort of treasure or other means to restrain the miasma. Even immortals needed special Dharma artifacts and detoxification immortal pills. Back then, the immortal Dao sects had been slaughtered by the immortal devouring beasts and were in a sorry state. Out of 100 immortals, it was already a miracle that one managed to escape alive. The immortals who were lucky enough to escape had barged into the outer realm with the mentality that they were lucky. They hadn't expected that they would actually be able to avoid the immortal devouring beast's pursuit. It seemed that the miasma in the outer realm had provided them with protection. In short, the immortal devouring beasts could not lock onto the aura of immortals in the outer realm. In this way, the miasma-filled outer realm became a refuge for the immortal Dao sections. Some immortals of the sects escaped into the miasma-filled outer realm, re-establishing their sects there and rebuilding their sections. To put it bluntly, he had found a place to linger on his last breath. These immortals had secretly snuck back to the Middle Earth with hopes of getting lucky, but without exception, all of them never returned. After that, no immortals dared to try again. Just like that, the outer world and the Middle Earth were separated. There weren't many celestial sects that had the chance to escape and rebuild their sects in the outer realm. The Xian Dao School and the Cloud Dao School were 2 of them. This was the conclusion Lin Jin came up with after listening to Qin Yunshang and Chen Xuankong's explanation and combining it with what he knew before. In that case, for the past 2,000 years, you've been hiding in that foreign land? Lin Jin asked after listening to their conversation. The 2 immortals who had been subdued by Lin Jin nodded at once. Senior, that's right. The 2 immortals were respectful before the curator. Compared to Lin Jin and the others' curiosity, these 2 immortals were just as curious. To them, the curator must be an immortal. Otherwise, how could he suppress them so easily? Also, he wasn't an average pseudo-immortal. He must be at least a true immortal. But the problem was, the curator's name had never been heard of in the outer realm. Based on the curator's words, they knew nothing about the outer realm. In other words, the curator was from Middle Earth. But how was that possible? Other than the outer realm, immortals would be mercilessly slaughtered by the immortal devouring beast the moment they showed themselves. There were no exceptions. This was what they were most curious about. Finally, Qin Yunshang couldn't help but ask, "Senior, how did you avoid the immortal devouring beast's attack?" The premise of this question was that the curator was an immortal. Lin Jin could tell. "There's no need to hide because I'm not an immortal." Lin Jin thought about it and decided there was no need to pretend. There was no benefit to it and he had to think of a way to cover up his lie. It was tiring. Instead of that, he might as well tell the truth. Lin Jin wasn't an immortal to begin with. Upon hearing this answer, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong were shocked, especially Chen Xiankong, who immediately said, "That's impossible. Senior, you're at least a true immortal. Otherwise, how could you break my dragon catcher so easily?" "I'm really not." Lin Jin continued to deny it. However, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong didn't believe him at all. They were now convinced that this mysterious curator was definitely an expert at the true immortal level. Not only could he open up a world of his own, the visitation hall, but he could also avoid the immortal devouring beast's attack. In an instant, the curator's image in the two immortals' minds grew larger and more imposing. Lin Jin now knew what he needed to know. Lin Jin had to admit that the newcomers to the visitation hall this time were an eye-opener. It was as if he had opened the door to a whole new world. Who would have thought that an immortal sect that should have retired from the stage of history would still exist? "Perhaps I'll have to find some time to pay it a visit," Lin Jin mumbled to himself. According to Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong, even to immortals like them, the outworld was an extremely dangerous place. Not only was there an endless miasma that spread for thousands of miles, but there were also all sorts of ferocious beasts lurking about. None of the beasts in the outworld were kind and many of them could even devour immortals. It was obvious how terrifying they were. Although the newcomers this time were unusual, Lin Jin remained as steady as a mountain. He had told them the rules that should be followed in the visitation hall no matter who they were. Of course, Lin Jin would give them benefits of equal value as a visitor of the visitation hall. Suddenly, Lin Jin recalled the bottleneck he encountered when he was refining the 4 C's calabash. With a sudden inspiration, he asked Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong about refining artifact. As it turned out, Lin Jin had asked the right people. The Mysterious Path School and the Cloudy Path School were famous existences during the Golden Age of Immortals. Both of them had many secret techniques for refining artifact. As the cornerstones of the two immortal sects, Qin Yunshang and Chen Xuankong's knowledge was naturally very profound and extensive. Now that the true immortal expert in their minds was testing them, the two of them naturally revealed everything they knew and answered respectfully. Chapter 598. Lin Jin realized that it was the right decision not to explain that he wasn't an immortal. Otherwise, these two immortals wouldn't be so eager to answer his questions. After listening to so many energy cultivation techniques, Lin Jin felt enlightened and even benefited a lot from it. Many of the questions he had stumbled upon before were now solved, and he had figured out how to refine the 4 C's freedom gourd. Lin Jin was overwhelmed with emotions. He couldn't wait to go back and give it a try. Since it was about time, Lin Jin bid farewell and left. Before he left, he told Qin Yunshang and Chen Xiankong that they could ask him anything regarding pet beasts. Once Lin Jin left in a hurry, Yi Yuzhou, Zhao Jingyan, and the others swarmed over to ask the two immortals questions. The two immortals were curious about the current situation in Middle-earth. With the curator intimidating presence, the two of them no longer put on airs as immortals and began conversing with each other as equals. Friendship grew out of a fight. The only one who was depressed was old Tian. He had put on an act to bully the newcomer, but he ended up going for wool and coming home shorn. Instead, he was taught a lesson. Now, he could only grit his teeth and swallow his pride. Fortunately, it wasn't a big deal. Old Tian felt that he was quite broad-minded. Meanwhile, after exiting the visitation hall, Lin Jin immediately began refining the 4 C's Freedom Gourd according to the 2 immortals' instructions. As he had been accumulating energy for several days, Lin Jin was only at a bottleneck. Now that he had succeeded, his progress was swift. In just a few hours, he had successfully refined the 4 C's Freedom Gourd. The moment he succeeded, the 4 C's Freedom Gourd glowed brilliantly. At the same time, Lin Jin took out the water reservoir armor and used a special seal to imprint it onto the 4 C's Freedom Gourd. The 2 water element treasures fused instantly. This was a reforging technique. For this, Lin Jin had to open the visitation hall's door to borrow its power to continue the refinement process. All of a sudden, the stone chamber was filled with all sorts of water spirits, and the pleasant sound of surging tides filled his ears. Under the influence of the water spirit energy, Lin Jin felt his body being tempered once more. It was as if he had been reborn. It was a wonderful feeling, and only Lin Jin could feel the benefit. His cultivation had definitely improved, but Lin Jin couldn't tell by how much. All he knew was that his strength had increased by several folds. Even without spells, Lin Jin felt that he should be able to take on a rank 2 pet beast in melee combat. He opened his palm, and the 4 C's Freedom Gourd floated down. Then, all the water spiritual energy and phenomenon in the stone chamber were sucked into the gourd. In the past, Lin Jin would never have been able to do this. Meanwhile, inside Black Wind Cave, the monsters were methodically renovating the cave. According to the new cave master's request, Black Wind Cave was to be turned into a proper sect for monster cultivators. Hence, the entrance to the cave had to be refurbished. In addition, the cave also had to build a training hall and a library. For the past few days, the monsters in Black Wind Cave had been working tirelessly. In addition, it was the hottest and driest season of the year in Liangzhou. The scorching heat outside was unbearable. If an egg was dropped on the ground, it would be fried in an instant. Hence, even inside Black Wind Cave, it was stifling hot. The monsters were drenched in sweat from the heat. Some of them had already taken off their clothes. For a moment, humanoid monsters with black, yellow, and mixed fur could be seen pacing back and forth. It was a sight to behold. When Lin Jin came out of the cave, he frowned at the sight. However, sensing the stifling heat, Lin Jin understood. With a flip of the 4 C's unrestrained gourd in his hand, an unbelievably cool breeze swept out. In an instant, the heat in the cave was swept away. The monsters were shocked. When they saw their new cave master, they recalled the new rules he had set down. One by one, they either nimbly or clumsily came over to greet him. "Greetings, cave master." The sight of monsters of all shapes and sizes bowing in unison was a sight to behold. Taoist who hurried over as well. He had been waiting for Lin Jin to come out of seclusion for the past few days. "Brother Tiger, come with me," Lin Jin called out. Taoist who didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. With a wave of his hand, Lin Jin summoned a cloud that swept him and Taoist who up. Moments later, they flew out of Black Wind Cave. Lin Jin's cloud mist was still the same cloud mist. But after refining the 4 C's unrestrained gourd, Lin Jin was able to cast the cloud mist with ease. Its power had also increased by more than 10 times. Even Taoist who was dumbfounded, feeling astounded. Truth be told, Lin Jin's cloud mist was only passable to him. While it was magical, it wasn't amazing. But this time, the same spell gave him a bigger shock. In the blink of an eye, he found himself thousands of feet up in the air. Beneath his feet was the desolate Liangzhou territory. Lin Jin stood with his hands behind his back, his expression filled with unprecedented confidence. After all, he had successfully refined the 4 C's unrestrained gourd. Only by truly refining it would he know how powerful the gourd was. It was because of this confidence that Lin Jin had such confidence. Truth be told, Lin Jin couldn't wait for the corpse cultivator to come looking for him. That way, he could just kill him and get rid of this threat. However, the corpse cultivator was well hidden. Given the vastness of the world, if he insisted on hiding, Lin Jin wouldn't be able to find him. On the other hand, Lin Jin had a rough idea of the other strong enemy, Patriarch Xue Pao's location. After Liangzhou's matter was settled, Lin Jin planned to look for Patriarch Xue Pao and get rid of this troublemaker. Back then, Patriarch Xue Pao had threatened Lin Jin many times. Since Lin Jin didn't wait for the man to come for revenge, he would take the initiative to deliver himself to him. Let's see if Patriarch Xue Pao would fulfill his promise and eliminate Lin Jin. Lin Jin raised his palm and the cloud beneath his feet rose rapidly. They were now thousands of feet up in the air. Taoists who had never been to this height before. Just the strong wind was enough to make them lose their footing. Fortunately, both Lin Jin and Taoist who had high cultivation levels, so they were able to keep their footing. Looking down from 1,000 feet in the air, one could see almost half of the Liang province. The vastness of the land was simply breathtaking. Taoist who was also dumbfounded. While he was excited, he couldn't help but feel his hands and feet go soft. Clearly, Taoist who didn't know that he was afraid of heights. Liangzhou is a dangerous place. One of the reasons is the lack of rain. Back then, you placed the 4 Seas unrestrained gourd in Liangzhou because you wanted to use this artifact to change Liangzhou's climate. But for some reason, you failed. Now that I've obtained this artifact, I should fulfill your wish. Lin Jin spouted nonsense. Back then, Taoist who did hide the 4 Seas unrestrained gourd in Liangzhou, but he never mentioned that he wanted to change Liangzhou's geography and climate. Lin Jin was merely making up an excuse for what he was about to do. Chapter 599. Taoist who nodded blankly. With a wave of Lin Jin's sleeve, the clouds in the sky converged. First, it was white clouds, then it turned into a thunderstorm. This time, Taoist who was truly dumbfounded. In the time it took to brew a pot of tea, a heavy downpour began. Taoist who knew what Lin Jin was trying to do. He was basically borrowing the power of his artifact to summon the clouds and rain. However, Taoist who shook his head. Although rain can solve an emergency, it's not a long-term solution. No matter how much rain falls, it will eventually stop. When that happens, Liangzhou will still be the same Liangzhou. Taoist who had stayed in Liangzhou for a longer period of time. Throughout his long life, Liangzhou had experienced several heavy downpours that lasted for several days. But in the end, other than a few floods, Liangzhou remained unchanged. Or perhaps, Brother Lin, you could stay in Liangzhou and confer rain on Buyun every now and then? Taoist whose question made Lin Jin fall into deep thought. The rain stopped and the clouds dispersed. Lin Jin knew that Taoist who was right. Just then, Lin Jin glanced around and noticed a huge valley basin in the distance. This terrain must have been created by a meteorite crashing down 10,000 years ago. If Lin Jin had been standing on land, he wouldn't have been able to make out the terrain. Only by flying 10,000 feet in the air could he have a clear view of the entire basin. At this sight, an idea suddenly came to Lin Jin. Flying above the basin, Lin Jin looked down to get a better look at the bowl-shaped terrain. A smile appeared on Lin Jin's face as he nodded. Great place. Taoist who was puzzled. What kind of place is that? Instead of explaining, Lin Jin said, Brother Tiger, please wait here for a moment. Having said that, a cloud separated from his body and descended rapidly. Less than 100 feet above the basin, Lin Jin steadied himself and closed his eyes, activating his beast deterrence ability. Vaguely, a door could be seen behind him. In addition, flames rose around Lin Jin and his blood energy surged. Even the breezy monster sword at his waist was humming. The moment Lin Jin opened his eyes, an invisible aura engulfed 100 miles of the basin. After a short period of silence, the ground in the valley began to shake and countless dust rose. It turned out that the insects, birds, and beasts that lived here had all fled. There were many snakes and insects here, as well as wild camels and desert goat beasts. There were quite a number of them who had been hiding in the shadows, but Lin Jin had chased them out. The scene was spectacular. Once the beasts were gone, Lin Jin took out the Four Seas Freedom Gourd and tossed it into the air before invoking a spell. Art of Falling Sea. The Four Seas Freedom Gourd flew into the clouds and grew 1,000 times larger. In the sky, at the end of the clouds, a huge gourd appeared. The next instant, Lin Jin changed his incantation and the gourd opened with a bang. Then, an endless amount of water poured out. From afar, it looked like water falling from the heavens. It was a spectacular sight. At this moment, the only thing that could be heard was the sound of water splashing. It was as if the Milky Way was bursting. This commotion had alarmed most of Liangzhou. After all, there were still some hidden experts cultivating in Liangzhou, including monsters like Black Wind Cave. Even some merchant caravans were alerted. In a mountain village 100 miles away, an old Taoist hurriedly ran out of a house. Then, he pinched his fingers together to calculate, and his expression changed. He immediately summoned an eagle beast, leaped onto it, and rode the eagle into the sky to rush over. 200 miles to the west, a giant golden-winged rock flew out of a cave on a cliff, heading toward the giant gourd in the distance. 50 miles to the east, a merchant caravan with 100 land beasts was slowly advancing on a trade route. The commotion caused by the falling water and the giant gourd in the air shocked the caravan so much that they stopped in their tracks to watch. The merchant guards were also dumbfounded. They had lived for so long, but they had never seen such a shocking scene. The pupils of the guard in charge of escorting the caravan narrowed. He immediately gave an order and mounted a swift wind horse. Tugging on the reins, he galloped over. The speed of this swift wind horse was extremely fast. It could cover a distance of a few dozen miles in just a moment. At this moment, anyone who heard about the phenomenon and had the slightest bit of ability were madly rushing in that direction. Many of them were hesitant, but it was clear that this could be a fortuitous encounter, or they could witness a miracle. Therefore, even if it was risky, there were still people who were willing to go and take a look. Some people thought about it again and decided not to go. But no matter what, the scene of the gourd hanging in the sky and the surging of the heavenly river would surely be recorded in the annals of history of Liang Province, and it would become a great event that shook the heavens and the earth. Lord Hu landed beside Lin Jin as well, gaping at the scene before him. Even though he had lived for 500 years, he had never seen such a scene. Because even his master, Daolord, couldn't do this with the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. However, Lin Jin didn't explain this to Taoist Hu. Having re-refined the Four Seas Freedom Gourd, Lin Jin's control and understanding of the artifact might even surpass Daolord's. After all, Lin Jin had obtained an orthodox immortal sex refinement method. Back then, Daolord didn't have such an opportunity. Or perhaps Daolord was in high spirits back then, so he didn't pay much attention to this artifact. Even if Lin Jin had read Daolord's heavenly book, he still couldn't figure it out. But no matter what, Lin Jin could now unleash the full potential of the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. This was how the massive gourd could float in the sky and pour seawater into it. The water was now gushing downwards, filling up the bottom of the basin. However, it would take some time to fill up the entire basin. Brother Lin, you're planning to create a sea out of thin air. Lord Hu exclaimed in shock when he came to his senses. Wasn't this just creating a sea out of thin air? Previously, Lin Jin had planned to summon clouds and rain, but he realized that it could only solve an urgent problem. It couldn't change Liang Province's basic desolation. Hence, Lin Jin came up with the idea of creating a sea. With this inland sea, he could definitely change the geographical structure of Liang Province. It was as if he had created a reservoir in this arid and desolate land. However, this reservoir was large enough. The raging waves continued to pour downwards. In less than 15 minutes, a third of the basin had been filled. The water was still raging, but after Lin Jin retracted his spell, it gradually calmed down. Lin Jin turned to see a gigantic golden-winged rock flying in his direction. Its wingspan was more than 200 feet. A behemoth. A monster cultivator. Lin Jin could tell at a glance. Lord Hu glanced over as well before saying, "I know this bird." Having said that, he went up to it. Chapter 600. The Golden-Winged Rock was a famous monster in Liangzhou. Although Taoist who rarely ventured out of Liangzhou, he still knew other monsters of the same level. Lin Jin glanced at the golden-winged rock, who had landed on the ground in human form. He mused that Liangzhou was a dangerous place with humans declining. It was a good place for monsters to develop. With his sea creation ability, Liangzhou would change drastically from today onward. It wouldn't be long before the humans here would grow stronger. Lin Jin wondered if this was a good thing or a bad thing. However, when he thought about how he had reorganized Black Wind Cave and established this monster sect, he wanted to lead the monsters here onto the right path. Hence, there was no conflict between the two. Turning his head to take a look, Zhang Xian saw that the water was still raging. In less than an hour, the sea would be filled up. Taoist who had already brought the golden-winged rock over in human form. The latter was a tall man with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an aquiline nose. Upon seeing Lin Jin, he saluted with a fist salute. "Greetings, Mr. Lin." His attitude was respectful. When Taoist who saw how polite he was a bit unhappy and said, "Brother Golden Wing, you've cultivated longer than me, and we've known each other for hundreds of years. I'm your big brother, and Brother Lin and I are sworn brothers. If you're so polite, where am I supposed to go?" It could be seen that Taoist who was joking. However, Golden Winged said with a straight face, "Mr. Lin, with your unparalleled powers, creating a sea with your miraculous skill is a blessing to the future generations of Liangzhou. It's a great merit and you deserve our respect. Other than that, Mr. Lin's ability to create a sea out of thin air is also admirable. It's not inappropriate for me to address you as Mr. Lin." Lin Jin nodded. Although Golden-Winged was a monster, he was knowledgeable and spoke in a more appropriate manner. Clearly, he had a great background. Thus, Lin Jin asked and found out that when Taoist who came to Liangzhou, Golden-Winged had been cultivating here for centuries and had been a monster for 1,700 years. Upon hearing this, Lin Jin was dumbstruck. Using this opportunity, he saw the rank 6 monster appraised in the visitation hall and immediately understood what was going on. This was his first time seeing a monster of this level. The one he saw in the 9-heaven world didn't count. After all, that wasn't Heartland. A rank 6 monster was definitely a supernatural existence at this stage. Moreover, Golden-Winged had an impressive background. He was a successful monster cultivator even before the immortal path had fallen. He had an orthodox immortal heritage, and his master was spiritual master Enigma. This was what Golden-Winged said himself. Lin Jin had no idea who Sage Mystic Miao was, but he was sure that he was once an ancient immortal. Upon learning of this, Lin Jin was filled with respect. Who would have thought that such a powerful monster would be hiding in Liangzhou? Because in terms of cultivation, a rank 6 monster was equivalent to an immortal. Similar to Taoist Tiger, Golden Wing had been living in seclusion for the past few years. He only cultivated in the cave abode he had opened up. Although he had only met Taoist Tiger a few times, after an unexpected friendship, they called each other brothers. Had it been in the past, Lin Jin would have been shocked to discover a rank 6 monster. But after experiencing the 2 immortal visitors in the visitation hall last night, Lin Jin didn't think much of it. However, Golden Wing's personality was worth befriending. Lin Jin wasn't biased by race, nor did he care if the other party was a monster. So far, most of his previous enemies had been humans. Committing evil had nothing to do with whether one was a human or a demon. If a human committed evil, even a demon beast would not be able to catch up to them. As Lin Jin and Golden Wing chatted happily, Taoist who watched from the side and urged the three of them to become sworn brothers. In his words, he and Lin Jin were brothers, so Golden Wing and Lin Jin should be brothers too. Simple and direct. And so, Lin Jin addressed him as Brother Golden Wing. Golden Wing quickly returned the greeting, imitating Taoist who and calling him Brother Lin. Sometimes things were just so wonderful. Although it was the first time they met, they felt that they regretted not having met earlier. Moreover, their temperaments were similar, so it was not surprising that they became friends and called each other brothers. In fact, Lin Jin's feat of creating a sea was so astounding that it startled half of Liangzhou. Besides Golden Wing, various forces, reclusive experts, and cultivators from all over Liangzhou had rushed over. Lin Jin scanned the area and noticed many silhouettes in the distance. However, in terms of cultivation, none of them could compare to Golden Wing. After all, Golden Wing could already be considered an immortal, a monster. Interestingly, that terrifying rank 9 immortal devourer didn't react to rank 6 monsters at all. Instead, it killed every human immortal that appeared. Just as Lin Jin, Taoist Hu, and Golden Winged were chatting and waiting for the Sea of Liangzhou to turn into a sea, an old Taoist priest jumped down from the back of an eagle beast. A nimble monkey jumped down with him. This monkey was quite interesting. It was dressed in robes and had half a human and half a monkey. It was clearly a monkey monster, but its cultivation was shallow and it wasn't proficient in shape-shifting yet. The old Taoist excitedly stepped forward to greet him. Wu Qian of Mount Sky River's Cloud Sect greets the great immortal. His attitude was extremely respectful. In fact, Lin Jin recognized the old Taoist at first glance. Wasn't this the old Taoist Wu Qian he met back in Jade Dragon City? Back then, Lin Jin even learned the 5 elemental talisman techniques from this old Taoist, including edicts, which he later developed into the powerful Vulcan Edict. It could be said that old Taoist Wu Qian had been a great help to Lin Jin. In addition, Lin Jin had to thank old Taoist Wu Qian for protecting White Ape. After that, Lin Jin tried to track down old Taoist Wu Qian several times but to no avail. Who knew that old Taoist would end up in Liangzhou? It seemed like he hadn't changed much. If he had to point out a difference, it would be that he had gained the aura of an otherworldly expert. However, the person who met Wu Qian back in Jade Dragon City was Curator, so the old Taoist didn't recognize Lin Jin at all. He even thought Lin Jin was an immortal. If not for that, the cautious old Taoist Wu Qian would not have come out. Wu Qian had spent his entire life searching for immortality. Because of this, when he saw the giant gourd floating in the sky and the falling water turning into a sea, he was certain that this was the work of an immortal. Hence, he came out to greet the immortal. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin said, "I once heard from Master that back in Jade Dragon City, it was all thanks to Mount Sky River's Cloud Sect's Taoist Wu Qian's righteous aid that our sect's demon disciple could be protected. It's truly an honor to be able to meet Taoist Wu Qian." Having said that, he returned the gesture. Wu Qian was flabbergasted. He stared at Lin Jin for a while before asking, "May I know who your esteemed master is?" "I don't know you, little Taoist." Lin Jin smiled. "My master is Curator and my name is Lin Jin. Also, I'm not an immortal." At that moment, Wu Qian finally understood. "So it's a praiser Lin." Chapter 601. After learning about this, Wu Qian was even more shocked. He had come to Liangzhou because he heard that there were immortal ruins here, so he traveled across mountains and rivers to investigate. Over the years, Wu Qian had been traveling the world as his home. He had been in Liangzhou for several months, but he couldn't find any traces of immortals. But today, when he sensed the change in the surrounding spirit energy and saw the giant gourd hovering in the sky, he was overjoyed and rushed over without a care for his own safety. Who knew it would be Appraiser Lin? The problem wasn't Appraiser Lin's cultivation level a little too high? Looking at the basin that was almost filled to the brim and the waves that were about to turn into an ocean, Wu Qian was overwhelmed with emotions and didn't know what to say. On the other hand, Lin Jin was polite to Wu Qian and introduced him to Taoist Tiger and Golden Winged. Upon learning that these two were monsters, Wu Qian shuddered in fear. Needless to say, he was terrified, but he still had to smile and greet them. He was not an idiot. The demonic aura around these two was extremely dense, and they were able to transform into human form. This meant that their cultivation level was extremely high. As for his insignificant cultivation level, in the eyes of these people, he was nothing. Therefore, he was very nervous and didn't know where to put his hands and feet. Lin Jin, on the other hand, took good care of Wu Qian. Just then, the giant basin behind them was filled with water. Lin Jin noted that this could definitely be called an inland sea. As far as the eye could see, he couldn't see the other shore. All he could see were waves. After all, this basin was so huge that it spanned more than 50 miles. To be able to turn it into an ocean like this was the work of an immortal. However, Lin Jin knew that he wasn't an immortal. He was only borrowing the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. If he were to describe it as magical, then it was because this artifact was unique. Lin Jin now had a deeper understanding that this Four Seas Freedom Gourd must have had a great history. According to Taoist God's book, Taoist God had obtained this artifact by chance from a hidden location. However, he didn't put it to good use and didn't even refine it. Perhaps even Taoist God himself didn't know that this Four Seas Freedom Gourd could create an ocean out of thin air. With a wave of his hand, the large Four Seas Freedom Gourd shrank rapidly before turning into a stream of light and landing in Lin Jin's hand. Lin Jin hung the gourd by his waist. At this moment, a sword was hanging from the gourd. He looked cool and at the same time, exuding a domineering aura. Suddenly, an idea popped into his mind. Then, he saluted the crowd and said loudly, "Curator's disciple, Lin Jin, has been ordered by my master to divert water to create a sea for the benefit of Liangzhou. I hope you will forgive me if I have disturbed you." He paused for a moment. Lin Jin had come up with this speech on the spur of the moment. Firstly, he wanted to make a name for Curator, and secondly, he wanted to say something. Otherwise, who would know what was going on in the inland sea? Other than that, Lin Jin figured that since he was going to establish the Black Wind Monster sect, there was no better time than today. In order to establish a sect, one had to have some momentum and guests from all over. Right now, he could use the momentum of creating a sea to invite guests to witness the opening ceremony of the sect. At this, Lin Jin said, "I am the sect master of Liangzhou's Black Wind Monster sect. My Black Wind Monster sect will be establishing our sect soon. If you have the time, you may come to Black Wind Cave to witness the ceremony. I will welcome you with open arms." His voice was loud and clear. Even if it didn't reach 100 miles, it would at least reach a dozen miles. After all, Lin Jin was quite capable now. Having said that, Lin Jin invited Golden Winged and Wu Qian to Black Wind Cave. Golden Winged was about to go, but when he heard that Lin Jin was a rank 4 beast appraiser, his eyes lit up. There were several times when he wanted to say something, but it seemed like there was something he couldn't say. In the end, he held himself back and agreed to Lin Jin's invitation without hesitation. Wu Qian obviously wouldn't decline. Firstly, this was something to broaden his horizons. Secondly, he didn't dare to refuse. At once, the group returned to Black Hole Manor. Lin Jin immediately summoned the flag chiefs in charge and gave them instructions. To put it bluntly, the establishment of a sect was just a formality. At the same time, Lin Jin would use this momentum to announce it to the world. After all, Lin Jin had already made arrangements for the sex regulations and other matters. Finally, after some discussion with Taoist Hu, Lin Jin decided that the Black Wind Monster Sex opening ceremony would be held 3 days later. The next few days would be used to prepare and entertain the guests. To Lin Jin, this was just like creating a sea in Liangzhou. It was an act of boundless virtue. Even if they didn't stand at the top, just becoming a powerful force on their side, or even a powerful chess piece, was worth it. Of course, Lin Jin had people spread the names of the Black Wind Monster Sex 2 grandmasters everywhere. From now on, whenever a Daolord was mentioned, people would immediately think of Curator. A Daolord was a fallen expert while Curator was a living legend. Creating a sea in Liangzhou had clearly become a huge catalyst. If it weren't for this, no one would probably show up for the Black Wind Monster Sex opening ceremony. But now, they didn't have to worry about this anymore. On the first day, more than 100 guests came to Liangzhou alone. They were all experts from Liangzhou. After all, news of Black Wind Cave's annihilation of Water God cult had spread throughout Liangzhou. With Lin Jin's sea creation, Black Wind Cave instantly became the #1 force in Liangzhou. No one dared to doubt this. Even if some people weren't convinced, they didn't dare to show it. On the second and third day, guests came from afar to congratulate them. Some of them Lin Jin had heard of, some of them he had never heard of. And when these forces arrived, they would always go to see the Liangzhou's inland sea that had been created out of thin air. As the saying went, seeing once is better than hearing about it. Only when they saw the vast Liangzhou inland sea with their own eyes would they be astounded and understand the Black Wind Monster Sex prowess. Also, with Lin Jin's deliberate push, the name Curator once again resounded throughout the world. The news of the Curator subduing the demons and establishing the Black Wind Demon sect spread like wildfire. The high-grade countries and peak powers of the various provinces in Middle-earth all had their own sources of information. Recently, the words Liangzhou's Inland Sea and Black Wind Monster Sect became the most frequently heard among the major forces. Needless to say, Curator was involved in these 2 incidents as well. There were even various rumors claiming that Curator was the one who created the sea in Liangzhou out of thin air. More people believed this theory. After all, Lin Jin's title paled in comparison to Curator. Those in the know knew that Lin Jin was Curator's disciple and an official rank 4 beast appraiser. But those who didn't know had no idea who Lin Jin was. 3 days later, before the Black Wind Monster Sex official opening ceremony, Lin Jin told Taoist Hu that he wanted to invite his master, Curator, over to preside over the ceremony. Taoist Hu was naturally in favor of this. After all, Curator was Black Wind Monster Sex Grandmaster and Taoist who was eager to meet this legendary figure. Chapter 602. However, Lin Jin would have to suffer. After all, if he were to disguise himself as Curator, it would be inconvenient for Lin Jin as the cave master to appear. This might not have been possible in the past. But now that Lin Jin's cultivation had improved and he had refined the 4 Seas gourd, the spells he could cast were incomparable to before. For example, camouflage. Lin Jin had always had a soft spot for camouflage. Although it wasn't particularly profound and didn't have any offensive or defensive capabilities, it could at most deceive and confuse others. However, Lin Jin was extremely serious about cultivating this camouflage. He wasn't going to boast, but when it came to camouflage cultivation, Lin Jin was definitely one of the best. Since ancient times, mirages, moon in the water, and flowers in the mirror were all related to water. In Daolord's heavenly book, there were also tips to using similar spells. Lin Jin's comprehension wasn't bad. After linking the mysteries of several aspects together, he was able to make a huge improvement in his camouflage. Although it seemed ordinary, it was in fact a huge improvement. Inside Black Wind Cave, in Lin Jin's private cave abode, he changed into his curator outfit. His clothes, shoes, hat, and mask were meticulous from head to toe, accentuating the curator's demeanor and aura. From his appearance, no one could tell that this was Lin Jin. This time, Lin Jin was going to appear in public as curator. But at the same time, Lin Jin, as the cave master, had to be present. Hence, with a wave of his hand, a cloud of water vapor floated out of the Four Seas gourd. The vapor condensed and gradually formed a human figure. Upon closer inspection, this human figure bore a striking resemblance to Lin Jin. Then, something miraculous happened. With a flash of light, the human figure formed by the vapor turned into Lin Jin's appearance. At first, it was only 80 to 90% similar. This was because it was Lin Jin's first time using this camouflage, and he wasn't used to it yet. But soon, after some adjustments, this fake Lin Jin became more and more lifelike. In the end, even those who were most familiar with Lin Jin wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's a pity that this is just an illusion. Although Lin Jin was overjoyed, he knew his limits. This was at most an emergency. Since this camouflage couldn't be used to speak, it could only fool others. However, being able to do this was already pretty good. Lin Jin straightened his clothes, hung the gourd by his waist, and strode out of the cave. Behind him, the fake Lin Jin followed respectfully. Bystanders would definitely not be able to see through it. Inside Black Wind Cave, there was an empty space the size of a plaza. This place would be used as the venue for the ceremony. By the time Lin Jin arrived, the place was already packed with people. Many of them were demon cultivators from the Black Wind Cave. All of them were grotesque and ferocious, but the interesting thing was that all of them were very well behaved. Moreover, when they spoke, they were very polite. This was the rule Lin Jin had set. As a monster, he had to be respectful and courteous. This way, even if he was a monster cultivator, he could earn the respect of others. There were also many guests who came to congratulate him. Among them, there were hundreds of various demon cultivators. Truth be told, it was rare to even see a monster on a normal day. Just like in the Jade Dragon Kingdom, monsters were extremely rare. In fact, as long as the land was populated by humans, monsters were rare. On the other hand, places like Liangzhou and deep in the mountains and forests where humans were rarely seen were places where monsters could thrive. After all, the two races were different. There was a natural estrangement between them, and they were enemies. Just like today, it was rare for human experts to gather together with monsters. For many people, this was their first time encountering something like this. Lin Jin scanned his surroundings through his mask. Whether it was the demon beasts or humans, they all stood up and saluted the moment they saw the curator. Even though it was the first time most of them had seen the legendary curator, they still did not dare to be rude. It couldn't be helped. Recently, the curator's reputation had been too great. Some even said that the curator and the Tao Lord shared the same lineage and were probably experts of the same level. Otherwise, why would one of the two grandmasters of Black Wind sect be the curator while the other was an expert Tao Lord from 500 years ago? They wouldn't believe there was no connection between the two. Lin Jin could guess what they were thinking. He borrowed the Tao Lord's title just to make a name for himself. But Lin Jin believed that it wouldn't be long before the title of curator surpassed that of the Tao Lord and became a living legend. Surprisingly, there were a few eminent monks among the guests. It was obvious that they were from Daluo Temple. Lin Jin immediately went over to greet them. Lin Jin had seen many of these eminent monks before. They were the rectors of Daluo Temple's various halls. Their statuses were high and their cultivations were impressive. Daluo Temple was quite a distance away from Liangzhou. For them to come all the way here to congratulate Lin Jin was a great show of respect. Lin Jin returned the favor by giving them the highest level of courtesy. See that? That's Daluo Temple's rector. This old monk is amazing. He's famous for subduing monsters and demons, but to think that he would come all the way to Liangzhou to congratulate a monster sect. It's like the sun has risen from the west. There's nothing strange about that. It's not like you don't know how Curator barged into Daluo Temple all by himself. I heard that Curator and Daluo Temple were on good terms after that fight. Something like that happened. A few gossipy fellows discussed in hushed tones. Besides Daluo Temple, Phoenix Palace's commander, Zhao Jingyan, was also here. Lin Jin didn't go out of his way to inform her, but to think she would make it here as well. She must have been keeping an eye on the news and made a move as soon as she heard the news. Otherwise, she couldn't have arrived so quickly. Since Lin Jin was familiar with Zhao Jingyan, he went over to talk to her. Both Daluo Temple and Phoenix Palace were forces on par with premium countries. Both of them sent people to congratulate Curator with gifts. There were also quite a few envoys from other middle-ranked and high-ranked kingdoms who had come. Jade Dragon Kingdom was the first to arrive. Now, it was rumored that Curator was from Jade Dragon Kingdom. Curator didn't deny it either. Hence, with this momentum, Jade Dragon Kingdom's reputation grew. Hence, how could Jade Dragon Kingdom not come when Curator established the Black Wind Monster Sect? Not only did they come, but they came in large numbers. Even Heavenly Spiral Kingdom sent someone over, and the person who came was none other than the third prince, Feng Ziqian. Just from this alone, one could tell how experienced Feng Junwu was. As expected of an emperor of a premium country, he was extremely thoughtful. Feng Ziqian was the closest to Curator, and he was almost the next emperor of Heavenly Spiral Kingdom. Sending Feng Ziqian here wasn't considered rude or neglectful. Besides these people, there were also many villainous experts and reclusive rogue cultivators. Some were famous while others were unknown. But it was undeniable that none of the guests here were easy to deal with. They were all experts with trump cards up their sleeves. Chapter 603. There were quite a few familiar faces among the guests. Just then, a woman got up and bowed. "Greetings, Curator, Mr. Lin. I'm Hu Yuzhen of Mount Desolate." This woman was incredibly beautiful and had a seductive charm to her. However, she was currently respectful and proper. Hu Yuzhen. When Lin Jin saw her, he recognized Hu Yuzhen. She was the demon he met on his way back from Jade Dragon City. Back then, Hu Yuzhen was a rank 5 cultivator with incredible strength. She had also entered the unending landscape with Lin Jin. After that, Lin Jin had comprehended spells on Mount Gua. At the same time, he had used the demon-slaying sword to destroy the obsession in Hu Yuzhen's body. To a certain extent, Lin Jin had saved her life. After all, it wasn't uncommon for one's obsession to turn into a demon and ruin one's future. However, it had been a long time since they parted ways on Mount Gua. To think Hu Yuzhen would come over to congratulate him. This was a good thing. However, it was Lin Jin who knew Hu Yuzhen back then, not the Curator. Hence, Lin Jin used a spell to create a fake Lin Jin who nodded at Hu Yuzhen as a form of greeting. "I've heard Lin Jin mention you before," the Curator said, focusing his attention back on himself. It couldn't be helped. A fake was a fake. Lin Jin could create an empty shell now, but he couldn't make this fake Lin Jin speak yet. Hu Yuzhen thought it was because the Curator was here and Mr. Lin didn't dare to say anything, so she didn't think too much about it. "I see that you're lacking blood. Are you injured?" Lin Jin's beast appraising skills had improved so much that even without touching her, he could tell that something was wrong. It was obvious that Hu Yuzhen looked normal, but in reality, she was slightly lacking in vitality. The latter was stunned before quickly nodding. "Curator's cultivation is incredible. You're right. Yuzhen was indeed injured some time ago." Lin Jin nodded. If his guess was right, Hu Yuzhen must have run into some trouble and came here with the excuse of congratulating him. She might be here to seek help, or she might be here to seek refuge. But no matter what, Lin Jin didn't mind. He didn't think anyone would dare to come to Black Wind Monster Sect and cause trouble at a time like this. Even if it was someone as powerful as the Corpse Cultivator, Lin Jin was sure he wouldn't be able to leave this place alive. With strength, one had to be confident. Let's rest in the Black Wind Cave for now. In other words, Lin Jin was telling Hu Yuzhen that she didn't have to worry about anything else now that she was here. Hu Yuzhen's face was filled with joy, but she seemed to have other matters to attend to. At this moment, she hesitated for a moment, then directly kowtowed and said, Hu Yuzhen has always been cultivating alone. Today, I wish to join the Black Wind Demon Sect. I hope that you will accept me. After saying that, he kowtowed once. Lin Jin hadn't expected this. However, the reason why he founded the Black Wind Demon Sect was to recruit all the demon cultivators in the world and lead them into the righteous path. Therefore, it was a good thing that Hu Yuzhen was willing to join the Black Wind Demon Sect. There was no reason to refuse. However, Lin Jin couldn't agree to this request right away. He had to carefully understand Hu Yuzhen's recent actions. If she committed all sorts of evil outside and came to seek refuge at Black Wind Monster Sect, Lin Jin wouldn't agree to it. Seeing that the curator didn't say anything, Hu Yuzhen was a little anxious, but she didn't get up. Similarly anxious was Daoist Hu. From the moment Hu Yuzhen appeared, Daoist Tiger's eyes never left this tigress. After cultivating for hundreds of years, Daoist Hu was just an ignorant little tiger cub. Later on, Daoist Lord rescued him and imparted him cultivation methods, allowing him to cultivate into a demon. Cultivation, metamorphosis, and training Daoist Hu had experienced a lot. Then, he got injured and struggled for hundreds of years. But there was one thing missing. In the past, it was rare to encounter a charismatic demon cultivator. Even if there were, they were either juniors or aliens. In any case, he had never encountered a tigress. But today, the sun rose from the west, allowing Daoist Hu to meet a tigress. Moreover, this tigress metamorphosis skill was even better than his own. Just that bewitching shade of purple was enough to stun Daoist Hu. Upon hearing that Hu Yuzhen wanted to join the Black Wind Demon Sect, Daoist Hu was so happy he almost fainted. He wanted Hu Yuzhen to join them more than anyone else. Only then would they have a chance to interact further. However, the curator didn't say a word. This was driving Daoist Hu crazy. He wanted nothing more than to agree on the curator's behalf. Fortunately, Daoist Hu knew the gravity of the situation. If it were Lin Jin, he would probably agree on the curator's behalf. After all, they were brothers, so this wasn't a big deal. But not the curator. Truth be told, when he saw the curator, Daoist Hu felt a tinge of fear. Moreover, Lin Jin was so strong that this curator could only be even stronger. His first impression and fear made Daoist Hu afraid to be rude to the curator. Hence, even if he was as anxious as a cat, he didn't dare to make a sound. However, Lin Jin noticed how anxious he was. Lin Jin was puzzled. What was wrong with Daoist Hu? Why did he look constipated? What happened? When Lin Jin noticed Daoist Hu's passionate eyes occasionally glancing at Hu Yuzhen, who was kneeling on the ground, Lin Jin was stunned. Then, realization dawned on him. Is Daoist Hu in heat? Lin Jin calculated the season, and shook his head inwardly. Come to think of it, if Hu Yuzhen wanted to join the Black Wind Demon Sect, especially under such circumstances, Lin Jin couldn't possibly refuse. As long as Hu Yuzhen wasn't a bloodthirsty person, it wouldn't be a problem. Lin Jin's contemplation earlier was just a facade. When Lin Jin asked Hu Yuzhen about it, the latter immediately assured him that she hadn't killed any innocent people or committed any evil deeds. And so, Lin Jin nodded and accepted Hu Yuzhen. In terms of cultivation alone, Hu Yuzhen could absolutely be considered as one of the best amongst the demonic cultivators. Just in terms of the art of transformation alone, she had already surpassed most of the demonic cultivators in the Black Wind demonic sect. Her cultivation method was definitely unique. Having such an expert join the Black Wind demon sect was obviously a good thing. As for Hu Yuzhen's injury, while it might seem troublesome to others, it was nothing to Lin Jin. He was confident that he could handle it. Accepting Hu Yuzhen into the Black Wind demon sect was a big deal. And since she was going to join the sect, she had to follow the rules to acknowledge a master. Who was Hu Yuzhen's master? Daoist who was eager to try, but Hu Yuzhen didn't even spare him a glance. When Lin Jin asked her, she gave it some thought and said, "Curator, I've received Mr. Lin's guidance, so I'm willing to acknowledge him as my master." The Mr. Lin she was referring to was obviously Lin Jin. This surprised Lin Jin. But that was fine too. Casting a spell, the fake Lin Jin came over and nodded at Hu Yuzhen. The real Lin Jin said, "We'll hold the ceremony another day. Hu Yuzhen, I can see that you're lacking blood flow. You must be injured. Let me take a look." Hu Yuzhen wasn't surprised at all. After all, this was the legendary curator. It was rumored that even the advanced beast appraisers in the sacred land of beast appraisers, Heavenly Jade Academy, treated Curator with the utmost respect. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Curator was a living legend to be able to groom someone like Appraiser Lin. Chapter 604. Curator's status in the beast appraiser community was just like his fame. Word had spread like wildfire. Those who knew Curator understood this. Those who didn't know him came here with the intention to broaden their horizons. Some even came here because they were in trouble and needed Curator's help. Seeing that Curator was going to treat the tiger demon, Hu Yuzhen, many turned to look at him. Even their breaths grew more cautious. Among them was the golden-winged demon. He was probably the only immortal-level monster here. Moreover, he was Lin Jin's sworn brother with Taoist Hu and Taoist Hu. His status was extraordinary. Every single one of the demonic beasts in the Liang province had heard of the name of the golden-winged demon. However, very few of them had seen him in person. At this moment, the golden-winged demon had taken on his human form. Even though most of them did not recognize him, there were still a few who did. "It's the golden-winged demon. Wow, even he's here. He's not just here. Didn't you see how the golden-winged demon bowed to Curator as a junior? Curator must really be a contemporary immortal." "I think so too. Great minds think alike." The two powerful demon cultivators looked at each other, their faces filled with appreciation for each other. Then, the two monsters turned their attention to Curator. A silver light flashed in Curator's hand. Lin Jin didn't know what he was doing, but he remained silent as if he was plotting something. Indeed, Lin Jin was plotting something. He had probed Hu Yuzhen's acupoints with his needles to check on her injuries. But upon closer inspection, the results made Lin Jin frown. The situation was more troublesome than he thought. There was a blood talisman in Hu Yuzhen's body. An expert had clearly planted this blood talisman in her body, and to a certain extent, it could even affect her mind. Also, as knowledgeable as he was, Lin Jin could tell where this blood talisman came from. If he was right, it was that guy's doing. At this, Lin Jin invoked a spell. The needles in Hu Yuzhen's body were activated immediately. Hu Yuzhen's head tilted and she fell to the side. With quick reflexes, Taoist Hu rushed over and caught her in his arms. "Help her get some rest. Her internal injuries are unique, so I'll treat her later," Lin Jin ordered. Taoist Hu nodded quickly. Truth be told, Taoist Hu was more than happy to hear that. Originally, he had some thoughts about Hu Yuzhen. Now that the opportunity to get close to her had come, how could Taoist Hu let it go? By the time Taoist Hu Yuzhen had settled down to rest, there were even more Yao cultivators asking Curator to treat them. Many of the demon cultivators had come out of admiration. Although Hu Yuzhen's situation was a little special, It was not enough to arouse any suspicions about the famous curator. After all, a person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. When they saw the curator heal the first old demon cultivator who came forward to seek treatment with a wave of his hand, the demon cultivators who had been watching from the sidelines all rushed forward. It was a bustling scene. Those who didn't know better might have thought that this was some beast appraiser's clinic. It looked like a large-scale clinic. Of course, Lin Jin wasn't the type to help with everything. He explained that he would only help with ailments and injuries. As for evolution methods and whatnot, there was nothing he could do even if he wanted to. Even so, more than 10 demon cultivators asked for help. Lin Jin investigated them one by one and quickly treated them. It didn't take long for all of them to be healed. Some of these demon cultivators were suffering from old ailments, some had problems in their cultivation that damaged their foundations, and some had fresh injuries from recent battles. To Lin Jin, these weren't worth mentioning at all. He could solve them easily, especially when he used the spirit refinement needle art to repair the meridians of a demon cultivator whose meridians had been damaged, allowing the paralyzed demon cultivator to stand up again. In that instant, all the demon cultivators present knew that the curator truly lived up to his name. In addition, although the Black Wind Demon sect was newly established, with the curator at its helm, it would be invincible. If anyone dared to harm the Black Wind Demon sect, all the demon cultivators in the world would probably not agree to it. The Golden Winged Demon could no longer sit still. Seeing how extraordinary the curator was, he steeled his heart and stepped forward to bow to the curator. Upon seeing the Golden Winged Demon stand up and bow, the other demon cultivators tactfully stepped aside, not daring to disturb him. Stunned, Lin Jin asked at once, "What is the Golden Winged Demon doing?" Before asking, Lin Jin had secretly investigated the Golden Winged Demon's condition. The demon's aura was strong, his cultivation was stable, and he had no illnesses or disasters. To put it bluntly, he was in great health. With this, he shouldn't be begging Lin Jin for help. Just as Lin Jin was puzzled, the Golden Winged Demon answered his question. So it was the Golden Winged Demon's son. As a demon who had cultivated for thousands of years, the Golden Winged Demon had a son 200 years ago. Naturally, he was a precious son and nurtured meticulously, eager to pass on all his skills to his son. However, the sky was unpredictable. Several years ago, the Golden Winged Demon's son, who was to be called Little Golden Winged for now, secretly went on an adventure. In the end, he was severely injured and fled back, fainting before he could say a word. Over the next few years, the Golden Winged Demon tried everything he could think of to prolong his only son's life. He used countless treasures and almost every method he could think of. However, the most he could do was to keep his son alive. It was difficult for Little Golden Winged to even wake up, let alone hand over his enemy so that the Golden Winged Demon could avenge him. This matter also became the thing that the Golden Winged Great Demon was most concerned about. He had long heard of the curator's name and had sent his subordinates to investigate, but to no avail. Now that he learned that the curator was one of Black Wind sect's grandmasters, he came here. His willingness to befriend Lin Jin was also to use Lin Jin's influence to get to know the curator. The curator might be his son's last hope. The Golden Winged Demon was cautious too. He didn't speak at first and only observed in secret. After witnessing the curator's supernatural powers with his own eyes, he couldn't hold back anymore and asked for help. "So that's how it is. I beg of you, curator, to show mercy and save my poor son." The Golden Winged Rock was almost bowing to the ground. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if the curator could save his son, forget bowing to him, even if he had to kowtow, the Golden Winged Demon would do it. As a great demon, he had the pride and dignity of a great demon. Under normal circumstances, even an immortal wouldn't be able to make him lower his noble head. However, for his only son, The golden-winged demon was willing to do anything. Just like now, he was begging for help in a humble manner. Fortunately, Lin Jin wasn't an arrogant person and he didn't like prodigal sons. Since he had become sworn brothers with the golden-winged demon, he wouldn't decline a request like this. At once, Lin Jin said, "There's no need for formalities, golden-winged demon. Putting aside the fact that you've become sworn brothers with my disciple, even if you hadn't, I would do my best to heal you if you came to me." Chapter 605. The golden-winged demon was overjoyed at this. "I'll bring my son over right now." The golden-winged demon couldn't wait any longer, but Lin Jin stopped him. "Based on what you said, there's no rush. Moreover, young Master Goldenwing's injuries haven't healed, so it's not appropriate for him to be moved. Why don't we wait for a while? Once the ceremony is over, I'll personally treat him." Needless to say, the golden-winged demon quickly nodded. Although he was burning with anxiety, he knew that it had been years, so there was no rush. Seeing how calm the curator was, there might really be hope this time. At the thought of this, the golden-winged demon found it hard to stay calm. The upcoming Black Wind Monster Sect's inauguration ceremony was like a torment to him. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. No one came looking for trouble. After all, who would dare to do so at this critical juncture? Forget the many experts in Black Wind Monster Sect. Just the golden-winged demon alone wouldn't agree to it. If anyone dared to stop him, he might just jump up and kill them. Fortunately, this was a monster sect, so there weren't too many unnecessary formalities. The ceremony was relatively simple too. The banquet that followed became the highlight of the event, and it was lively. Lin Jin knew that the golden-winged demon was anxious, so he merely toasted and drank with him at the banquet. Then, he had the demon lead the way. He wanted to check on young Master Goldenwing's condition. The golden-winged demon was obviously happy. Taoist who wanted to follow, but Lin Jin stopped him. It was simple. Black Wind Monster Sect was established today, and someone had to watch over it. If Taoist who were to leave, who would greet the guests? Of course, to prevent the fake Lin Jin from being exposed, Lin Jin brought him along as well. It was much safer this way. "Curator and Brother Lin, please sit on my back." Once outside, the golden-winged demon immediately reverted to his original form. He had transformed into a gigantic golden condor. The size of his body was simply breathtaking. Fortunately, Lin Jin had seen the world. Leaping onto the condor's back, the golden-winged demon immediately flapped his wings. In an instant, they were far away from Black Wind Monster Sect. Lin Jin could see that with each flap of his wings, the golden-winged demon could travel 1,000 miles. At most, he could flap his wings 3 times before landing on a giant cliff. Amazing! This was Lin Jin's first time seeing a monster that could fly so fast. It could be said that this was the fastest flying monster he had ever seen. There was no other. This golden-winged great demon that had reached the 6th stage indeed had some skill. This cliff was the cave abode of the golden-winged demon. There was a huge cave entrance on the cliff, and there were many eagles flying around it. When they saw the golden-winged demon, they all came forward to bow. The golden-winged demon invited Curator and Lin Jin into the cave abode. Then, a beautiful woman with a demonic aura welcomed them. "Come, madam, come and greet Curator. This is my sworn brother, Brother Lin Jin," the golden-winged monster immediately said when he saw the woman. Needless to say, this woman was Madame Golden-Winged. At a glance, Lin Jin could tell that Madame Golden-Winged wasn't weak either. She was a rank 5 monster, only slightly weaker than the golden-winged demon. There were indeed many demonic cultivators in the Liang province. Not only was there the Black Wind Cave, but there was also the Golden Wing Cliff. Amazing! Madame Golden-Winged was clearly well-mannered as she immediately went forward to bow. When she heard that Curator was here to treat her only son, Madame Golden-Winged knelt on the ground in excitement. "Curator, if you can save my son, I'm willing to do anything to repay your kindness." Madame Golden-Winged was filled with sincerity. With this gesture, the golden-winged demon actually knelt to the side as well. Lin Jin quickly helped him up, but the golden-winged demon said, "Curator, you don't have to think too much. Brother Lin and I are brothers, so you can be considered half a master to me. It's only right for a disciple to pay his respects to his master." Lin Jin chuckled inwardly but didn't say much. After all, parents were always concerned about their children. Soon, Lin Jin saw young Master Golden-Winged. It was a dying golden-winged bird. Clearly, due to his severe injuries, he couldn't even maintain his human form. Young Master Golden-Winged wasn't small in size, but most of his feathers had fallen off. He looked like he was on the brink of death. Lin Jin frowned at just one glance. He had encountered a tough nut to crack. This didn't look good. Lin Jin hurried over and reached out to touch the bird, letting the Museum of Deadly Beasts appraise it first. Upon seeing the results, Lin Jin's expression darkened even further. Fortunately, he was wearing a mask. Otherwise, the golden-winged demon and his wife might have fainted if they saw this. Strictly speaking, young Master Golden-Winged wasn't the only one who was physically injured. His soul was the one that suffered the most damage. Someone had shattered young Master Golden-Winged's soul. If the golden-winged demon hadn't been so powerful as to forcefully seal young Master Golden-Winged's soul with his demonic energy, he wouldn't have been able to hold on for the past few years. Even so, this wasn't a long-term solution. If things went on like this, young Master Golden-Winged would die within a year at most. This is a little tricky, Lin Jin thought. However, it was only a little tricky. The Museum of Deadly Beasts provided several treatment plans. As long as there were treatment plans, there was hope. The only difference was how difficult it was. After a moment of contemplation, Lin Jin came up with a plan. He chose a plan that currently had the highest chance of success, and that was to use the body-casting needle to mend young Master Golden-Winged's soul. Fortunately, Lin Jin had the body-casting needle. Otherwise, without it, he would have to find some unique treasures to mend young Master Golden-Winged's soul. For example, the soul-nurturing grass. Most people had never even heard of this item, let alone looking for it. It could be said that Lin Jin had saved a lot of effort with the body-casting needle. At this, Lin Jin said to the golden-winged demon, "Good move, golden-winged demon. Even you wouldn't be able to last more than a few years if you only condense your soul with demonic energy. You must be at your limit now, right?" The latter was stunned at first before realization dawned on him. The curator has sharp eyes. He even noticed this. But he was even happier. The reason was simple. If the curator could figure this out, he might really have a way to save young Master Golden-Winged. With this, the golden-winged demon grew even more excited. "But there's one thing you have to promise me. When I make my move later, you have to retract your demonic energy. Otherwise, your son's injuries will be difficult to treat." Lin Jin wasn't bluffing. Currently, young Master Golden-Winged's broken soul was being forcefully condensed by the golden-winged demon's demonic energy. Although it could be kept intact, the soul fragments were a mess. There was no way to mend it. Only by withdrawing his demonic energy could Lin Jin move the needle. This depended on whether the golden-winged demon was willing to trust him. Because everyone knew that if he withdrew his request now and the treatment failed, young Master Golden-Winged would not even have the chance to linger on. The golden-winged demon clearly understood this as well. Sure enough, he hesitated. Although he believed in the curator's ability, there was always a what-if. If he failed, his son would surely die. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.